What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Unlockables podcast, the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. As always, I am your host. My name is Eric. I am very thankful to you for showing up wherever, whenever in time and space you may be located. It means the world to me that you're willing to stop by this little show, check out the podcast, and check out what is going on in the world of video games. Now, before we get started on the topic today, the game of the topic today, I have a bit of a confession that I need to make. Many of you listening may have heard earlier this season, whatever I'm calling this season of the Unlockables, that I did an episode with Keith on the infamous game Shadow the Hedgehog. I wanted to celebrate the year of Shadow before the Sonic 3 movie came out and before Sonic X Shadow Generations came out. And I went into the game with a bit of a misunderstanding. I thought you could go in and play Shadow the Hedgehog. I thought it was kind of like a standalone game and just kind of would start the story of Shadow the Hedgehog. But through my research, I found out that it's actually connected to several games that came out prior to Shadow the Hedgehog. So today I am setting the record straight. I am doing my penance for that game and going back to where it all began, at least for Shadow the Hedgehog. And we are going to be playing Sonic Adventure 2 and talking about that game for this episode. But as with all Sonic episodes, I can't possibly do this by myself because I have very limited experience with Sonic as a character. So I had to have on a very special guest. And my guest today is another good friend of the show. They are the co-host and producer of both the Fun and Games podcast and the Reignite podcast. I am very thankful they have taken time away from mastering the art of chaos control to do this episode with me. It is none other than my good friend Matt, aka Stormageddon. Matt, thank you for joining me tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Excited to be here. I don't know if I ever told you the embarrassing story of how when I was signing up to do a Super Mario RPG episode with mutual friend Rick Firestone on his podcast, I was like, Rick, I thought you did that already. It turns out I confused my bearded white guys, and I was thinking of your episode of Super Mario RPG, which was excellent. And Rick was like, well, that explains a lot. I just shout out to Rick, who I adore. I had to tell that story here. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. I am probably the most obnoxious Sonic fan most people know. And so I'm excited to be a part of this. As I can now safely say, I've played, not necessarily finished, but I've played every single Sonic game that has ever been made.
That is why I brought you on for your expertise, because this is only my fourth Sonic game that I've ever played. 3 of them having been this year now, which is absolutely insane. If you would have told me at the start of the year that I would play 300% more Sonic games than I ever had in my entire life, I don't know if I believed you. And also, just to circle back, being compared to Rick is probably the biggest compliment I could possibly ever receive from anybody. So thank you so much. I serve my role of bearded white guy NPC very well. I'm very proud of it. So thank you very much. But we're going to talk about Sonic Adventure 2 today. Matt and I have a little bit of history with Sonic games this year that we'll maybe tease a little bit when we talk about our brief history and personal experience with them. But before we do that, as is podcast tradition, as is video game podcast tradition, we must always ask each other, what have we been playing recently? So, Matt, what have you been playing the last few weeks? Obviously, besides Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah, so I, as a fellow video game podcaster, am always playing too many games at once. I try and balance it like one per platform, and sometimes I hold to that, but I have a ton of games in limbo that are incompleted. But the ones that I've been actively playing over the last few weeks, besides the game du jour, as another podcast wants to say, I've been playing Astrobot, has been consuming most of my time. I finished it this week. I really loved Astro's Playroom, the kind of tech demo, mini game, short game that came with the PS5. I never played the VR game because I don't have a VR headset, but I was really excited with what I played of that short game. It was like a full-length, like Mario-style 3D platform would be amazing. And lo and behold, it's one of the best platformers I think I've ever played. It's not the best. I think there are still a bunch that come above it. But as far as something that Sony has put out, and specifically something that's not a Mario game, this one's pretty spectacular, from the power-ups to the visuals, all the cameos. As like an old school PlayStation head, I've pretty much owned every PlayStation console except the third one. I know most of the legacy, and so all the cameos were a lot of fun to discover. The platforming challenges were really fun to play, though I had to abandon them about halfway through. I got what I needed to be the game, but there are harder levels that are really short but really punishing. And I'd done like half of them, and then I got into like the latter part of the game and they got really hard, and I found myself getting angry, and I was like, that's not what I want from this game. So I had to put it down for a bit and then come back to it and just finish it. The story is kind of nothing. It's cutesy, it's a lot of fun. I would love for Astrobot to become a character beyond the nostalgia of PlayStation. It's fun to find the bots and the cameos and the costumes, but like I would love for them to build kind of a lore and a universe for Astrobot like they've done for so many other mascot platformers. But we'll see if they keep throwing more nostalgia at us. I'll probably buy it anyway. I mean, I'm of an age where I eat that shit up. So but besides Astrobot, I've also been playing, so I in convergence with all of the Sonic that we've gotten into this year. Folks who follow me online know I replayed Sonic Adventure for the first time in a long time this year for a yet unnamed project that will be revealed soon. I had also, while talking about that online with folks, mentioned that I've never played Sonic Heroes. It's the only 3D Sonic game I have never played. And so this week, I downloaded a very legal way to play it on my Steam Deck, totally up on the up and up. And I started playing it, and I'm enjoying it so far. The stages are really long, and there are a lot of them. There are 4 campaigns in this one, and each campaign seems to have like 16 stages or so. And so, like, I enjoyed what I played. I think it's a clever mechanic. For those who don't know Sonic Heroes, it's like teams of 3, and each of the character in the team, when they're in the lead, have different power-ups. And it allows you to traverse the stages differently. And so I played as the hero team, which is Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. And it's a lot of fun. The music's really good. The graphics are pretty great. I'm playing the GameCube version, which is supposed to be the most standout version of the game. But I don't know that I'm going to see it through to the end. We'll see. I'm going to take my time with it. But like, I just kind of, in the way that Sonic Adventure kind of this game, Sonic Adventure 2, we'll talk about more, like really changes it up from level to level on some degree. This felt stagnant pretty quick. Now, maybe I wasn't meant to play as just Team Sonic the whole time, and I was meant to switch it up, but I didn't, and so I kind of burned out on it. So I put that down. And then the one other game I've been playing is, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Yar's Revenge, which was an old Atari game. It goes way back. It was this interesting little like kind of shoot 'em up game. Well, Atari partnered with WayForward, who are famous for making the Shantae games, to make a game called Yar's Rising, which is within that franchise and is a Metroidvania. Very cool. I got a review code for it, so shout out to WayForward for that. And I started playing it, and I have immediately fell in love with it. It's got this like cyberpunk Dayglow look, tons of techno music, and it's been a real blast to play. I'm only like 2-ish hours in, I think, but I'm really enjoying it. The writing's really cheesy and fun and funny in the same way like the Shantae games are. And so it's been really fun. I don't have hugely fond memories of the original Yar's games, but like I do love WayForward and their pantheon of games. And so to play a new game by them that's kind of attached to Atari's history has been a lot of fun. It was not what I expected. I thought I was just going to kind of, like, I guess for whatever reason, I forgot it was a WayForward game and they make quality stuff. And so I should have known it would be a blast, but I really didn't know what to expect of it. So I ended up really enjoying it. The music is great. It's like this kind of electro bubblegum pop stuff. I eat it up. It's great. But yeah, I think that's the major stuff I've been playing. I was playing Star Wars Outlaws just before I started Astrobot, which I plan to go back to. I thought it was a perfectly fine 7 or 8 out of 10 game. Like, not knock your socks off, but if you like Uncharted and you want an open world Uncharted but with Star Wars characters, that's basically what this game is. And so hoping to get back and complete that before the end of the year, but I was digging what it was doing.
Sounds like a perfectly fine experience, if you ask me. 7 and 8 out of 10s are perfectly fine games. Sometimes they're the best games.
Turns out games don't have to be like perfect pieces of art to be fun and enjoyable.
Wow, what a wild concept. And I'm going to have to check out, you said, what was the WayForward game called again?
Yar's Rising.
Rising.
YARS Rising. Yeah, Yar's Rising.
Very cool that it's connected to a older Atari game. I have, unfortunately, I was exposed to WayForward through the Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, and I thought they did a fantastic job with that. It's definitely put WayForward on my radar and maybe want to experience more of the things that they have done. Just because they they so lovingly recreated a game that I love so much. And a lot of people didn't really like what they did with Reboot Camp. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was so genuine to the original experience. So I'll definitely put that on my list. I wanted to ask you about Astrobot because I had it on my radar. I wanted to pick it up. I didn't get to. I love platformers. They're one of my favorite genres. It seemed like immediately when this game came out, people were just like, this is incredible. Like, finally we have like a platformer that compares to some of what Nintendo has been doing. And I thought that was really cool because, you know, I'm all for other platforming experiences other than Mario. He's been the dominant force in that genre for so long. But part of me as the Mario defender, as the Mario guy, I guess, in our circle, kind of took offense to that. I was like, whoa, like, hold on now. Like, this game surely is great, but let's not discount the legacy of 40 years of Mario that's built up. Do you think, would you put Astrobot alongside any other Mario game that's ever come out, you think? Is it to that standard of quality?
Absolutely, without a second of hesitation. And I should caveat this by saying I am also a Mario super fan. I've played every Mario game that's ever come out.
Okay.
I will admit that I did bounce off Wonder, not because it's bad, but it's just okay. Like, I felt like graphically it was superior to the new Super Mario Brothers games, but mechanically kind of left me feeling the same. I also have a preference for the 3D Mario games. Mario 64 is one of my favorite games of all time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, this gave me vibes of like Mario Galaxy and actually Mario Sunshine with some of the traversal a little bit.
Ooh.
Like there's a hover jump that you get that also does damage that's very familiar to the FLUDD. It's a little less floaty than Mario is in that game, but like, yeah, I would put this, I don't think it's better than Mario Galaxy or Mario Odyssey, but I think it's on par or in that league. I would say I would easily put it in my top 10 platforming games of all time.
Wow.
Top 5 would be tougher because I consider Sonic games platformers, even though we'll get into it, but there's, I think, a more nitty-gritty way to describe these games. But like, I think there's room for Astrobot, especially since Mario's been the dominant force, like you said, for over 40 years. The day I realized that me and Mario were born basically in the same year made me a little uncomfortable. But
we just talk about that. It's okay.
He just looks so much more youthful than I do.
He's aged very well.
But like, you know, besides Sonic and Mario, who've been around for ages, whether you consider them the dominant force or not, like, we really don't have a lot of others. Like Crash made a comeback. Crash 4 was a lot of fun, but he was kind of MIA for a long time. And mascot platformers have kind of gone the way of the dodo, except Bubsy, who we can't seem to kill no matter how hard we try. So I think for you, Eric, being the Mario fan that you are, you absolutely need to play Astrobot because you will have so much fun with it. Its structure is very akin, I think, to Mario Galaxy, where you're going to different planets, rescuing the robots, you know, doing little collectathon stuff, finding stuff. I think it's totally worth your time.
I'll definitely pick it up eventually here. I just need to find the time between all the other stuff that I am playing. But no, I'm glad to hear from a trusted source that it lives up to that reputation. When it comes to platformers, Mario has spoiled me, so I have very high expectations whenever I play one. I'll go next. I'll just talk about briefly what I've been playing. A couple of things here besides Sonic Adventure 2. The first is I caved to the hype and I ended up picking up Space Marine 2, the Warhammer 40,000 game.
So I'm really interested in that. I played the original Warhammer 40K Space Marine on the 360 when it came out because I loved Gears of War, and I had a friend who played Warhammer and was like, if you liked Gears of War, you'll like this game. It's basically the same without the cover. And I was like, okay, and I loved it. Now, admittedly, I haven't played it in a very long time, and so I don't want to buy the new one until I repurchase the old one on Steam and replay it. Just, I like continuity for story and stuff, but I'm really curious about your thoughts because I loved the original.
Yes, so I'm about 50% of the way through, and I'll preface this by saying, like, this is my first experience to anything Warhammer at all, outside of knowing it being a tabletop adjacent game to Dungeons and Dragons and seeing the videos of people painting all the minis and making these gigantic armies. So I dove in pretty hard. I started playing the game, and I will say this, I did not play the first one. I saw some footage and I went back and I watched maybe some reviews and I started watching some retrospectives on the first game. It does a very good job of, if you're coming to the game for the first time, not having to you don't have to have played the first one.
Okay.
And so I think that makes it very welcoming to newcomers. And I got to say, my God, not even to touch on the game, the lore of Warhammer 40,000. You know me, I am a lore junkie when it comes to stuff like this. Warhammer 40,000 is very, very dark.
Yes.
It's a very, very, like, when they say it's grim dark, that is not a joke. There's some very, and I think that the thing that they did, my understanding of Warhammer and the little bit of like dozens of hours of watching lore videos and stuff, this game absolutely does right by the things I would expect a Warhammer game to be. It's big, it's loud, it's bombastic, it's violent, it's exaggerated in all the way that Warhammer exaggerates the themes of basically the worst parts of humanity, which is kind of the point of Warhammer. It nails that early 360 vibe you were talking about so perfectly. It's like a modern Xbox 360 game. That's what a lot of people have been saying. And yeah, I absolutely 100% get those Gears vibes from it. I'm loving it. It's great. And it does a really good job of like not holding your hand. Like they'll just talk about things that are happening in the world and they won't like stop to be like, by the way, this is what this means. This is what that means. It comes up in organic conversation. You kind of just learn about it as the characters talk about the world that they're in and the things that they're doing. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a great story. It's that just visually like Xbox 360 gore, larger than life type of Gear style game. That's exactly what it is. And there's so much stuff on screen at one time, and the locations are so like gigantic. It's like it's obviously this space fantasy combined with like this medieval architecture, and it's absolutely stunning. I haven't really seen anything else like it in video games before. So I think in terms of at least my very basic understanding of what Warhammer is, I think this is a really great product. And now that I've been researching it more Warhammer stuff has just been showing up in my TikTok feed and all that stuff. And a lot of people who've been into the hobby for a very long time have said it's a very, very good representation of what the hobby is, of what the lore is, of what the game is. So I'm really happy for that. I'm sure Warhammer fans are really excited. It's gotten me interested in Warhammer. I don't know if I'll ever like paint minis or play like that. But like I said, I've been watching videos on the lore. It's absolutely nuts. So yeah, I would highly recommend Space Marine 2. Like I said, especially if you've played the first one, it's just a really damn good time. It's a great power fantasy and it's just fun. I'm actually going to be hoping to play a little bit with Nick and Will from Friday Night Gamecast. They invited me to play with them. So I'm hoping to experience that multiplayer aspect of it and see what it's like just killing some alien hordes with the boys. You know, that's old school Xbox 360 days. Hop on and just killing aliens with the boys, right?
I love that. Yeah. I mean, so I was watching our friend Josh from the Still Loading podcast play Bolt Gun on his Twitch stream, which is a like a Doom boomer shooter version of Warhammer, that 40K, which looked really cool, which came out I think a few months ago. And so like that's been on my radar. And now the new Space Marine, I really want to play it. I've heard great things, and like hearing that you love it and you've never even played the first one really kind of revitalizes my love of wanting to play, because I love the Gears games too. I eventually burned out on them, and like after the trilogy was done really well, but after that I kind of wasn't invested in the architecture anymore, and before they were all on PC Game Pass I kind of fell off. And so to hear that we've got a game in that vein from another franchise that I loved, that I never thought like a decade or two later we'd get a sequel, is pretty exciting. So I'll definitely have to pick it up at some point.
Yeah, Warhammer's having a moment, and the community has been very welcoming. I've seen tons of videos explaining like what certain stuff is, how to play certain lore bits. So the community has been really, really awesome from what I've seen. Very welcoming to the people that are like, this game kind of did the same thing as Helldivers. It kind of caught fire on social media, and everyone kind of ran out and picked it up. And there's a lot of new players in the Warhammer community. So I think that's really, really great for that community. Anytime that we can spotlight tabletop games, and that they deserve it, because Game Workshops and Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons like have such great communities around them. So anytime that we can spotlight those and make those grow, I love it. In addition to that, I picked up the indie game that came out, The Plucky Squire.
Ooh.
That's been pretty good. I've been enjoying that. I guess the game wasn't received as well as people thought it was going to be. I've seen some like kind of lukewarm reviews about it. I don't really know what that's about. I'm enjoying it very much. I love the whole like storybook aesthetic. It's really, really inventive. It creates some really, 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 really interesting puzzles with like moving words around the text in the storybook and being able to jump out into like the real 3D world and jump back into the book and using your powers to turn the pages. It creates some really, really interesting puzzles. And I'm only about 2 hours into it, so I'm excited to experience more. I can't give too much of like my final thoughts on it, but what I've played so far, I've read some of the reviews, and again, it's gotten some 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 is not a bad game by any means. I haven't found myself agreeing with the kind of lukewarm takes. They have said the game kind of slows down towards the end and kind of loses some momentum. I haven't gotten there yet. But I've been enjoying it very, very much. That one was on my radar. I'm big Devolver Digital. Anything that Devolver Digital is involved with, I love their stuff, and usually go out of my way to support it. So those are the two big things. Obviously, I'm also playing Kingdom Hearts for my series. I've gone back and played Kingdom Hearts 3. I played it through again because I picked up the Steam collection when it was on sale.
Right.
Back in July, you could get every Kingdom Hearts game for $70.
Wow.
What a steal. So
That's a steal.
definitely go back and do that. And I'm finishing up my playthrough of Kingdom Hearts 3 twice now for my show. And hopefully those episodes will be out on my show in a couple of weeks. I'll finish that one because every time I sit down to finish writing it and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the last part. I'm like, oh no, I have to do like 3 more parts. So hopefully that will be done pretty soon. But that's pretty much it for me. And I can't really speak on anything else because we're doing some other projects that aren't ready to be revealed yet. But they shall be revealed here in the relatively near future. Now, with that out of the way, Matt, what do you say we start diving into, as you said, the game du jour and talk a little bit about Sonic Adventure 2?
Let's do it.
Sonic Adventure 2 is a 2001 platform game developed by Sonic Team USA and published by Sega for the Dreamcast. It is split into 2 stories: the hero story featuring your familiar cast of Sonic protagonists such as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and the dark story featuring Eggman, Rouge the Bat, and Shadow the Hedgehog. This is, of course, the video game debut of Shadow the Hedgehog, and in celebration of the Year of Shadow, that is why we are playing it. Sonic Adventure 2 was developed during a relatively chaotic time in Sega's history. Sonic Team overall was downsized during this time, with a portion of the team moving to San Francisco to establish Sonic Team USA. Yuji Naka and Takashi Iizuka would produce and direct respectively, and Shiro Maekawa would write for the game, marking the first time he did so for a Sonic game. And I think this game kind of has a tonal shift from the original first 4 Sonic games and from like Sonic Adventure itself. We'll talk a little bit about that. The dev team for Sonic 2 was quite a bit smaller in comparison to Sonic Adventure 1, which I think at one point had almost 200 people working on it for the one of the launch games of the Sega Dreamcast. Sonic Adventure 2 would be released in June of 2001, coinciding with the 10th anniversary of Sonic. It would be the final Sonic game developed exclusively for a Sega console. As we all know, not long after this, Sega would transition from a player in the console market to being a third-party developer as the Dreamcast was discontinued. A port of Sonic Adventure 2 would be released on the Nintendo GameCube later in 2001, becoming the best-selling third-party game on the Nintendo GameCube. Sonic would become multi-platform with its next release, Sonic Heroes. Sonic Adventure 2 would go on to be ported to literally like every future console. It was released digitally on the PS3 and Xbox 360 in October 2012, and on Steam in November 2012. The PS3 and 360 versions would then go on to be made compatible with the PS4 and Xbox One in 2017. Sonic Team would also release Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, which featured a mostly unchanged single-player outing, a multiplayer effort, and Game Boy Advance connectivity, which replaced the VMUs of the Dreamcast, where you could connect with the GBA game Sonic Advance. And there's also some slight texture differences in there, but that's really splitting hairs. And then I found this was a fun fact. The game Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg was developed using a updated version of the Sonic Adventure 2 engine. So fun fact for all you Billy Hatcher fans out there. For the review scores, I'll just read off a couple here just so you can kind of understand how this game was received when it came out. It's currently sitting at an 89 out of 100 on Metacritic, a 73 for the GameCube version. Edge Magazine gave it a 7 out of 10. GameSpot an 8.6 out of 10. IGN a 9.4 out of 10. GamePro 4.5 out of 5 stars. And Game Revolution gave it a B grade. So very good reception for this game when it first came out. Now, Matt, I know you said at the top of the episode you've played literally almost every Sonic game. What is your initial thoughts on Sonic Adventure 2 and some of your personal experiences with this game and maybe the Sonic franchise as a whole?
Sure. I guess I'll start with the franchise as a whole. So I got the Genesis was the second or third video game console I ever get. Well, fourth, I guess, if you count the handhelds, because I had a Nintendo. I was gifted a 2600. Don't do the math on how old that makes me. I was gifted a 2600 as a little kid. And then the NES was the first console I ever got. Shortly after that, I would be gifted a Game Boy. I would want a Game Gear. And then I think after the Game Gear, I got the Genesis. Because the Genesis I had was the Square Genesis, not the larger profile Master System. And so,
yes.
But when I did get it, it came with Sonic 2. Sonic 2 was the pack-in title at that point. It had been for a long time after Sonic 1. And shortly after that, got Sonic 1 and became obsessed. I remember the release of Sonic 3 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Actually, I think I remember the release of Sonic and Knuckles, and I was so excited because Knuckles was my favorite character, and I loved fighting against him in Sonic 3 and yearned to be able to play as him. And so when Sonic and Knuckles came out, Voltron formed the greatest Sonic game probably still to this day ever made, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But like I have a deep history in the Genesis titles, played Sonic Spinball a ton, and then would go on to play every Sonic game after that, except for Heroes till recently. Wouldn't play them all in order. I don't think I played Lost World till like last year, and after like 20 minutes abandoned it because it is absolutely awful. But that said, I've been a devoted Sonic fan ever since. I loved Frontiers. I will defend that game to death. I think while it is imperfect, it is the best 3D Sonic game made in a long time. But to talk about the Sonic Adventure games specifically, I never owned a Dreamcast. I loved the Dreamcast. One of my best friends had it. Shout out to Matt Caron. And we played it a lot together. Crazy Taxi, NFL Blitz. I think it was 2000 was the one on that. And then, of course, both Sonic games. I loved playing both Sonic games. We played them from beginning to end together over many play sessions. But it wouldn't be until the GameCube versions came out, because I got the GameCube at launch, or shortly after launch, I think. I bought it, fun fact, I bought the GameCube a week before the price cut, and Electronics Boutique wouldn't honor the cheaper price when I went back with my receipt. So
those jerks.
Those jerks. But so it wasn't really still the GameCube that I would own a copy of both Sonic Adventure DX and then Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. I might have beaten them when I was playing them with my buddy Matt, but I know for a fact I didn't really thoroughly play them until I got the GameCube versions. And I loved these games. I loved them then. As someone who's now replayed both of them now, I still love them now. I think they have not aged as poorly as people like to make it out. And then once you had asked me to do this, I decided to play the Steam version. I was going to try and play it on the Steam Deck, but it had its issues. And while I emulated the Dreamcast version on the Steam Deck of the first game, I wanted to try and play this version on the PC. And it actually ran pretty well on the PC as long as I played in window mode. And so I played on the desktop. It took me about 14 hours and 54 minutes to beat, give or take. And by beat, I mean finish the whole narrative, including the extra chapter. We'll talk about it. No, I didn't get every emblem. I didn't do the Chow Garden this time, though I love it. I couldn't. Like, if I started that, we would never record the podcast because I'd never be done. But yeah, so that's as brief a history as I can give on Sonic. But I know that you and I also, by the time folks are hearing this, the Game Boy Advance episode that we did of Fun and Games that you guested on as a retrospective will be out.
Oh, yes.
And I talked quite a bit about the Sonic Advance series, which I also love, which are some of the best 2D Sonic games. And so I figure I'll shout them out here too. But that's my not so brief history with the Sonic franchise and specifically Sonic Adventure 2.
I'm glad yours is a lot more extensive than mine because mine is much more limited than yours. And unfortunately, Matt, you're going to have to hear this story again because the way this whole kind of adventure for no pun intended for Sonic began this year for me was you and I ended up together on an episode that featured Sonic Adventure, the first one. And that's for a project that is upcoming. Will not spoil that, but we ended up on that episode together. And that was really my first kind of experience with any kind of 3D Sonic ever. I've missed most of Sonic most of my life. My first experience with him was, I always remember when I went over to my cousin's house as a kid. He had all the consoles, he had all the games, so most of my experience with any type of different games came from him. And at that time, he had a Super Nintendo and he had a Genesis and anything else that was out around that time. And the Super Nintendo was always in the main living room of his finished basement. It was always featured on the big screen TV. And the Genesis was just pushed off in the side in their workout room on like a little tiny CRTV that was just on a table in the corner. And that's where I first ever played probably the first Sonic, I would assume, just Sonic the Hedgehog on the Genesis. So that was kind of always my mental image of Sonic and of the Sega consoles, right? They weren't deemed worthy to be on the big screen TV in the living room. They were shoved in the side off to where no one could see them, and that's kind of where they belonged. And after that, I really went on to have no more experiences with Sonic the Hedgehog for all the way up until my adult life. My first real time I went out of my way to experience anything Sonic was I had the pleasure of going to E3 2017 when they opened it to the public. That was a really awesome experience, and that was the year they had two Sonic games there. They had Sonic Mania and they had Sonic Forces, I think was the second one. Yes.
Correct.
And so I was like, oh, cool, Sonic's here. That's pretty neat. I heard some good things about Sonic Mania coming up, and I wasn't planning to like go and interact with that booth at all because I just wasn't interested in Sonic. We went to dinner one of the first nights we were there, and we had a really awesome waiter. His name was Randy, and we were talking to Randy. He was like, yo, it's super cool you guys are at E3. I wish I could go. He's like, you guys have to do something for me. I'm like, Randy, we were probably a little drunk at this time. We've been drinking after the show. I'm like, Randy, you've been an awesome waiter. I'll do anything for you. What do you need? He's like, go to the booth and play Sonic Mania for me. And I'm like, Randy, I will go play Sonic Mania for you. So the next day we got in line, went and played Sonic Mania, and that was the first Sonic game that I ever went on to purchase because I had a great experience with it. And then after that, I had no more experiences with Sonic until we got put on the Sonic Adventure episode together. And I got to tell you, Matt, when we got put on that episode, I was a little bit nervous because I bought into all of the things on the internet that were said about Sonic Adventure and how I was just ready for this catastrophe of a video game experience that I was about to play. But surprisingly, I had a pretty good time with it. And if you want to hear more about it, listen for when that episode comes out for that thing later in the future. I'll make sure to announce it. I had a really great time with it. And this was also the time that they kind of announced that this was going to be the year of Shadow the Hedgehog. And so I as soon as they announced the year of Shadow the Hedgehog, I immediately messaged my good friend Keith. He's been from Main Quest. He's been my podcast buddy basically ever since I've gotten into doing podcasting. I said, hey, we have to do Shadow the Hedgehog. And so he agreed to do Shadow the Hedgehog with me. And in my research for doing that episode on Shadow the Hedgehog, I discovered that story links back to a lot of stuff that happens in Sonic Heroes and in Sonic Adventure 2. And once I finished it, I kind of felt like I hadn't done that game justice, as I was missing some key elements. What I was really trying to do for that game was, since it's the year of Shadow, was analyze the character in the games that Shadow appeared in. And I kind of started in the middle, which is not really fair when you're kind of doing a retrospective analysis of his character overall. So that's when I messaged Matt. We had such a good time on the Sonic Adventure episode. I said, hey, I'm doing this thing, Year of Shadow. Do you want to come on? And you graciously agreed to do that and played Sonic Adventure 2. Had a pretty good time with it, not to spoil my overall ending thoughts. And now here we are on this episode. So I've had a very, very interesting just overall exposure to Sonic over my entire life. And I got to tell you, if at the start of this year, like a time traveler had come to my house like January 1st and said, you're going to play 400% more Sonic games than you've ever played in your life this year, I probably would have been like, what are you talking about? Because at the time I was playing like 6 RPGs at the same time. But I think it's filled in a really interesting gap in my video game knowledge and my video game experience because, like I said, I'm a huge Mario guy and I'd always experienced everything through the lens of Mario. So to kind of finally start seeing things through his one-time rival has really kind of shifted my perspective on like video games around that era and given me an appreciation for the things that Sega was trying to do. So I'm really happy to have gotten to play it. And again, my good friend Matt is here, and we're gonna have a great conversation on it. So, Matt, do you have any other kind of thoughts, personal experiences, or initial thoughts on Sonic Adventure 2 before we start diving in and analyzing all the good stuff?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, to kind of spoil a little bit, I said earlier, like, I love both these games, and I think they absolutely still hold up with some asterisks. But I'm glad that you got to play them also. I, too, was nervous because we were going into that future project that we'll stop teasing and eventually talk about with a known Sonic hater, and I thought I was going to be beating you both back with sticks, but thankfully I ended up convincing everybody on the podcast that Sonic Adventure is amazing. But in all seriousness, I think that these games get a bad rap, I think, because the internet is the internet. I'm really glad that you asked me to come on. Sonic Adventure 1 would have been my choice if I had to pick between the two games, just because I think I like that one better for its structure and story. But that said, and heavier nostalgia. But I'm glad that you actually asked me to come on for this one, because I hadn't replayed the second game in a much longer time. And so I was glad to kind of get to jump back into it.
I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because I don't really have a place in my outline where that gets addressed, but you're absolutely right. And I mentioned it too a little bit. You always have to be careful when you see and hear things on the internet, because yes, the internet is a wonderful modern miracle of an invention where you have access to literally all of human knowledge at the tips of your fingers. But at the same time, it has a weird way of like distorting things to a very, very warped perception of literally anything you look at. And a lot of my experience of Sonic had been through that warped lens of the internet. And it was things of like, oh, haha, funny, people playing through Sonic 06 because it's bad game, and they just yell at it, and oh my God, Sonic is terrible. And you know, just I kind of experienced it through just from the outside looking in. And from the outside, all you see is just like anytime there's a Sonic game that comes out, or anytime that anybody kind of does anything regarding Sonic, it's just kind of a dog pile.
Yeah.
And through my experience this year, I found that a lot of that is really unwarranted and really like not really called for. It's exaggerated for the sake of exaggerating it.
Yeah.
Because again, are these games perfect? No. Have there been some stinker Sonic games? Yes. It seems like it's generally considered that Shadow's not that great, Sonic 06 not that great. But there are stinker games in any video game series. I could pick out any long-running series and pick out some games that aren't that great from that series. And I will say this about Sonic fans and the Sonic community. They keep getting games because they support their games wholeheartedly. Even if it's not that great, even if it's something that comes out and doesn't impress anybody else, the Sonic fans show up for Sonic. And they keep getting games because of it. And that's a lot more than I can say about a lot of other fans of other franchises who seem to make it their mission to hate on the thing that they say that they love more than actually try to enjoy it. So, yes, this has been a like spiritual religious journey for me with Sonic. And just right off the bat, I think that I don't know if I'd ever get to the point where I'm as hardcore of a Sonic fan as everybody else, but I think I can get to the point where I say, you know, a majority of the Sonic games I've played, I have enjoyed. And I respect the hell out of Sonic fans for standing by their games, because as myself, being a fan of a series that often gets mocked and made fun of for how ridiculous it is, I understand. I understand, and I feel a kinship with the Sonic fans. So, Sonic fans, you have a teammate in the Kingdom Hearts community. So, I will stand with you.
If you didn't bring that up, I was going to bring that up because it's pretty similar. As someone fan of both series as well, like the internet overblown hate, especially like about the narrative of Kingdom Hearts, is like it is confusing, yes, but it's not as overblown confusing as the internet makes it out to be. And so, like, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think it's worth saying.
let's just dive into some of the stuff about the game. And I think right off the bat, I think the easiest place to start is gameplay. Because I think whenever you start with Sonic Adventure 2, you start with maybe what I could call one of the most iconic opening sequences in any video game, one of the most iconic opening levels in any video game, and that is the city escape. I guarantee you, if you haven't played Sonic Adventure 2, you know this sequence. It's just in the zeitgeist. First levels in video games are so crucial for setting expectations, and this sequence really, really sets the bar. It makes you, as soon as you play it, you understand what Sonic Adventure 2 is going to be about. So, Matt, I'll just toss it over to you to get us started here. City escape sequence, what do you think?
I mean, it is one of my favorite Sonic levels in the history of Sonic. I love that the opening cutscene, Sonic jumping out of a helicopter on a snowboard and then snowboarding down the streets of wherever he is and like knocking cars out of the way, doing tricks. The music, of course, the Escape from the City, which is by Ted Poley and Tony Harnell, is probably one of the most famous Sonic songs, especially from the modern era. There are definitely a few others in this soundtrack and in Sonic Adventure and in the later games, but this is one of those tracks. And like it just gets you running, right? No pun intended. Gets you moving. You get a sense of Sonic's controls, the speed, the kind of platforming you're doing, the rail grinding, and then the whole second sequence, the whole back sequence where you're being chased by the semi-truck and the camera shifts to like a almost Crash Bandicoot style perspective where the truck is coming down on you and you're running towards the screen.
Oh, yeah.
And then like the music shifts to this incredible guitar track that just kind of rips all the way through. It's just such a perfectly crafted level. There are other levels in this game that I think are really good and that I really like, but I can't think of many other video game levels that are so perfectly crafted like this is. I would think I would put it up there with like the original Super Mario Brothers, like that very first level, or even like Green Hill Zone in the first Sonic. Like it's one of those kinds of levels where they're very good at having a flow and a style, so you can get used to how Sonic's gameplay is, which is pretty consistent with Sonic in Sonic Adventure 1. There are some new tricks here, and this is kind of the springboard to where we end up with Sonic's style of play in 3D games later. For better or worse, there are some better than others, but this is like a perfect video game stage, if you ask me.
It does its job and it sets the tone immediately. As soon as like Sonic jumps out of the helicopter and starts, grabs a piece of it to use as a snowboard, which, we should design more things to be detachable from helicopters that we can use as snowboards. I mean, that's just, right? That seems really convenient to me. But yeah, I was thinking the same thing along the same thought lines as you like when I think of iconic openings to video games, iconic moments, iconic levels where they set the tone and you understand what the game is about within the first moments you pick up the controller. This is one of them. You said Mario Bros, the first level. I thought of Mega Man X, that city sequence, and I also thought of the Halo, for that Pillar of Autumn level when you first come out as Master Chief. This is up there with those. It's incredible, and I experienced something very weird too when I first played it. Even though I'd never played this game before, I experienced a weird sense of nostalgia for something that I had like never played. I was like, this made me yearn for like the younger days because it's just so from that time period. And it hit me, and I was grinning ear to ear because my wife even looked over me. I too played this by legal means. I did purchase it on Steam, but I did play most of it emulated on my laptop so that I could play in bed with my wife while our kid was sleeping, more convenient. I did satisfy one of the 9 layers of emulation hell that Cade laid out in one of my most recent episodes. So there you go. Shout out to Cade. But this was a moment that I was like really heavily anticipating. And usually when something is like that hyped up or like you have certain expectations for it, those expectations usually can't be met because your expectations are just so high. This met and exceeded them. This was more than anything I ever thought this was going to be. And it just kind of blew me away when I first played it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this stage specifically, it's not just the gameplay, though it's really good, but it's the presentation, it's the way it looks. it's the music. We're going to dive deeper into the music later, but like, again, that track, Escape from the City, is so iconic, but also perfectly paced to this stage. And then the guitar subtrack that comes in later, that's sort of born out of Escape from the City, but I think it's technically not part of that song. Also, like, just perfectly matches that chase sequence. And so, yeah, it's really tightly designed in a way that just feels satisfying.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, you would be experiencing this level first if you, of course, picked the hero path side of the story. And that'll take us into our next point. Nice little segue there. Sonic Adventure 2, it's divided into basically two story paths. There's the hero path, like I mentioned, that features Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. And then there's the dark path, not calling it like the evil or villain path, but the dark path, because dark is more edgy, which features Shadow the Hedgehog, Rouge, and Eggman. Which kind of insane that we get to play as Eggman in this game. That's kind of nuts when you think about it. So the split story basically gives you the two sides of the story, and you have to play both of them to kind of have a full understanding of what's going on. Lets you play through the entire story as the hero characters or the dark characters that are uninterrupted instead of like trying to jump around between 6 characters all the time. Very briefly on the hero and dark mode stuff, Matt, do you like this? Do you like that it's kind of split up here? Do you think this works?
I like it. I think so. This is a departure from Sonic Adventure 1 where you had all the characters. So it was Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and then there's the robot who I'm blanking on, Gamma, and Big the Cat. And you could play them in any. I think you had to start as Sonic, and then you would meet these other characters as you played as Sonic, and as you met them playing as Sonic, it unlocked their campaigns, and you could either continue along as Sonic, play it straight through, and then do each character straight through, or you could jump around. Whereas this, like you said, it's like the good guys are siloed, and then the anti-heroes / villains are siloed. It's very important actually that it's called the dark path and not the villain path, because there are revelations to the story of 2 of the 3 Eggman's a villain always, but like but like the other 2 characters, Shadow and Rouge, there is some depth to their storytelling, and so I think that's why it's called the dark path. But I agree, as far as I can remember, you, besides like the racing games, you never play as Eggman again. This is the only time you play as Dr. Robotnik, which I think is pretty fascinating, considering he's a character. He's been in the game since the beginning, as long as Sonic has, and has been in almost every game. But I think it works. I mean, I think my caveats with this system is more about the kinds of stages that each character gets, because we can say it here, Sonic and Shadow stages are very similar, not the same, but similar style. Tails and Eggman's stages are similar in style, and then Knuckles and Rouge's are also. So like those pairings are all the same play style. And then they have different stages apiece, but they are similar. Or if they're in the same locations, the stages themselves are still different. And I think it's an interesting take. I'd be curious to see them do it again. My memory of Sonic 06 is hazy, but Sonic 06 was essentially Sonic Adventure 3, but I can't remember the structure of that game. I believe it was a hub world, and you picked between Sonic, Shadow, or Silver, but again, it's hard to remember. I've blocked out most of that nightmare. But for sure, I think this is one of the more interesting takes they've done for how they structure the stories. What I do like about this, and we'll get to it when we talk about more of the endgame stuff, the way they structure this so that how they then lead into the final mission is something similar they did in Sonic Adventure 1. And I do like that. I like that this game reveals a final stage after you finish both campaigns. It's why I was lamenting earlier about Sonic Heroes and how long that one path was, and that there's 4 of them, because I get the feeling that's also going to do the same thing. Once you play as all those teams, you'll get this last chapter that includes everybody or something. But I think it works for this. I don't think it's perfect, but I don't actively dislike it. I love it depending on what stages I'm playing. I'll put it that way.
That does seem to be a theme, because it's similar in Shadow the Hedgehog too. In order to get the real ending for Shadow the Hedgehog, you have to basically do complete all the different paths and get all the different endings in order to get that final stage, get that true ending. I agree with you. If you were to like put a gun to my head and say which one I preferred, would Sonic Adventure 1 or 2, I think they both have their strengths. I did like seeing the story from different characters' perspectives in Sonic Adventure 1. I felt like it was, okay, now I'm seeing the story from this character's perspective and this character's perspective. But I think this works well too, at least for gameplay. I think this works well too. Because, like you mentioned, you have the three different basically types of stages: the action stages, which feature Sonic and Shadow, the mech stages, which are Tails and Eggman, and the hunting stages, the treasure hunting stages, which feature Knuckles and Rouge. If you just gave me like 16 action stages in a row, I'd probably kind of get a little bit tired of it. So I do kind of like that it breaks up kind of like the monotony, injects a little bit of like variety in there. I think story-wise, I'll talk about it when we get to the story. I think I would prefer it the Sonic Adventure 1 way, because the way the story is written and kind of structured here, it's kind of hard to line up like what's going on between like both paths, because they are very like siloed off from one another. And I was watching a video on the story recap today on YouTube by a guy named Pariah695. He does a really good analysis of the entire story. He played the game with a mod created by the person's name escapes me. But the mod basically puts the entire game in story order on levels. So you're basically playing the levels based on story order, not by path order. Oh, cool. And that way it was easier to follow the story in that way. But I feel like that would then hurt the gameplay because, like I said, I think having the characters siloed off from one another is not as overwhelming as just jumping between all the characters at once. So I think there's some advantages and disadvantages to the way it's done, but for gameplay, I think it works just fine. We mentioned the different characters have the different types of stages, so that segues nice into playing the actual game. As far as like playing the different stages go, what was your experience like actually playing the game?
So I mean, I love almost all of the action stages with Sonic and Shadow. There were a couple towards the end that kind of made me want to throw my controller a little bit, just because they get kind of unnecessarily difficult and we're dealing with a live system. Most of my frustration with this game as a whole is that it has lives. We've moved away from that in the modern games, which I appreciate. Yes. But like the biggest challenge about older Sonic games is that you get checkpoints which work per life, but once you run out of lives, you have to start the stage from the beginning. And for some stages, that's not too bad, but if I had just gotten to like the second to last checkpoint on a Tails stage, and then I lost my last life and had to do the whole thing over again, and it took me like 5 to 6 minutes to get there, because those stages aren't always based on speed. In fact, most of the time aren't. That was very frustrating. But the act of playing the stages again, like I've said before about Sonic Adventure 1, my memory of the hard parts were worse than it actually. Like Big the Cat, I will say it everywhere, overblown. Those fishing stages were not great, but they were not hard. They were not a problem or challenge.
There's worse fishing in video games by far.
By far. Also, how can you be mad at Big the Cat? He's voiced by John St. John, Duke Nukem himself. There's no way to be mad about that. But anyway, also fun fact, because I only noticed it towards the end of the game, Big the Cat has tons of cameos throughout the game. He's never actually in the stages, but he's like in the background or between things. And like you could just kind of see him in places. And it's unclear if he's really there or if it's just a cameo for the fans. But I caught him a couple times and that was pretty fun.
Maybe you're just hallucinating Big the Cat and we don't know.
Maybe I am, yeah. But overall, like, I don't mind the gameplay. I think I struggled the most with some of the Tails stages. And it's funny, I thought it would be for both these. So to explain a little more, Tails, instead of running around like a two-tailed fox who could fly like in other games, he's riding in his plane, the Tornado, and it transforms into a mech that he can walk around with and shoot. And they're essentially like running gun stages, shoot 'em up stages a little bit. And Eggman stages are the same. His egg ship becomes the Egg Walker, and you run around doing the same thing. And I felt, because I played all the hero stuff first, and then I played the the Dark Path. Some of Tails' stages were just really aggravating. I think because of how they were set up, where the pitfalls were, certain things weren't clear. Whereas most of the Robotnik stages, I was fine, or Dr. Eggman, as it are. Sorry, I grew up with Dr. Robotnik. They've moved away from that. But although it's funny because his grandfather's in this game and they refer to him as Gerald Robotnik. So it's just, and he says it's his grandfather, so it's just very funny to me. But I ended up not hating the Eggman stages as much. They were still not great. I would rather have done something else than mech stages, but I think my memory again of them being awful was worse than they were. And then the Knuckles and Rouge stages. So this is the only thing besides Sonic that's carried over from the last game that's almost identical, with some minor changes. But Knuckles missions in Sonic Adventure 1 were these treasure hunting stages where you were searching for 3 shards of the Master Emerald, sometimes something else, but 3 of those things. And that's repeated here, and Rouge does the same thing. Sometimes you're looking for Chaos Emerald, sometimes you're looking for keys, but it's treasure hunting 3 things. There's a radar, there's hint screens that you click on, and I don't mind them. Also, part of the thing with the Knuckles stuff for me is Knuckles is my favorite character, and so just getting to play as him, glide around, climb, run around. Also, some of his stages have some of the most fun music because almost all of his stages are associated with hip hop, which I love as a fan of hip hop. It's definitely not perfect, and they are definitely, I think, for someone who has less rose-colored glasses, might get frustrated. And I like Rouge the Bat as a character. I'm actually watching a show called Sonic Prime, which is a Netflix series, and it has a bunch of the Sonic characters in it, including Big the Cat. It's the whole Sonic Adventure cast, and Rouge is in it, and her character is actually really great in it, Big as well. And some of my favorite stuff done with Shadow, but it's just funny to come back to this game after starting to watch that. I'm currently watching the 3rd season. There are 3 seasons of it, and just to see the different ways these characters are portrayed throughout time is really fascinating to me. Knuckles is kind of always a beefcake knucklehead. Tails also overeager, although that TV show has a twist that I won't reveal here. But yeah, I think all in all, I enjoyed everything. I definitely had points of frustration and friction though. I can't think of a specific stage right now, but I definitely know there were days where I was tired of starting over because I lost all my lives. And there's a specific friction point I'll talk about if we talk about the end of the game, because that's where I hit, I think, the most friction.
For myself, I found myself at times, I enjoyed the experience overall. And like I said, I think that it's vastly overblown. Just all the stuff about Sonic in general and about Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are vastly overblown on the internet. I think I found myself when I was done with everything and I set it down and I was thinking about my experiences between Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. I think I enjoyed 1 more for what it was. And I don't think that was... I still can't really identify what those reasons are, because I found Sonic Adventure 2 to play comparably similar to Sonic Adventure 1. There wasn't too many things I could pinpoint specifically where I was like, oh, this feels weird. This feels not like what I expected it to. Compared to where I came from prior to this, coming from Shadow the Hedgehog, well, I would say Sonic games still feel like they play pretty loose and pretty fast. Compared to Shadow the Hedgehog, this game is so much tighter and so much easier. I don't know what it is about Shadow the Hedgehog. Everything felt like ice physics in Shadow the Hedgehog, and Shadow would go from 0 to infinity with the slightest tilt of a stick, and it just felt very, very difficult to control. If you play Shadow the Hedgehog first and then come back to this, it's night and day. It's so much easier to play. It's so much. It's just so much tighter, even though it's still compared to something like Mario is much, much looser. As far as the different types of stages, so the action stages, the mech stages, the hunt stages, the action stages were great. I love those. They keep the momentum going. It doesn't always emphasize speed. You're not meant to just rush through the stages, but there are points in the stage where you get to build up this momentum and kind of fly through sections of it. And building up momentum, to me, Sonic isn't about going fast. It's about building up momentum at the points where you can build up momentum. And that, to me, is what makes Sonic fun, because you're just oh yeah, these parts are designed for me to be able to just kind of fly through them. And then other parts are designed more traditional platformer stage. It's kind of a mix there. So I really like those. I agree with you. Towards the end, there are a couple, especially for Sonic and Shadow stages, a couple difficult stages that are frustrating with the checkpoint and the live system, because they do require some difficult platforming and grinding on rails and jumping from rail to rail. That was a little bit frustrating, and I eventually just did the whole save state thing to kind of get through it. Ooh, I'm such a bad person. But I found myself really enjoying the action stages overall. I always look forward to when I would get to another action stage. We talked a little bit about the mech stages. I know that you were not as high on them, especially the Tails portion of the mech stages. I didn't find myself having too much trouble with those. I think the last Tails stage and the hero path is pretty annoying. I was kind of annoyed with that one, but across the board, I don't think I had as I don't think they annoyed me as much. And I found my experience with Eggman similar to you. I found that I didn't really have any trouble with any of Eggman stages as well. And the thing I liked about that is, since you get to play as Eggman in this game, we'll go into the story stuff. This story brings in like the government and the military, and really kind of makes like these generic government military robots the enemies. And it's cool that you get to play as Eggman because he fights those same enemies during those stages and just kind of destroys them and flies through them. Yeah. And it, from a narrative standpoint, it makes me have like more respect for Eggman as a threat because he's just fucking up the government. And you're just kind of like, oh, like, we usually see Eggman just getting trounced by Sonic over and over, but when he goes against like the world government and basically like blows through their secret military installations with no effort, you're just like, oh yeah, like Eggman is a genuinely very big threat in this world. Thank God we have Sonic to kind of keep him in check. Yeah. I specifically expressed to you that early on, I was really frustrated and really having a hard time with the Knuckles and the Rouge stages. There's just something about them that as soon as I did the first one, I was just like, I did not enjoy this very much. I hope there's not more of these. And surprise, like 1/3 of the story is these Knuckles treasure hunt stages. But you had some really good advice. You told me you're like, hey, these stages are meant to slow down. You need to just slow down. You can take the hints. The hints will help you find where the emeralds or whatever you're looking for are. And when I did that, I had a much easier time with them. I think the problem mostly landed on me. It was a problem with me because I was coming from the action stages or the mech stages where I was able to like maintain this momentum moving forward. And I felt like the Knuckles and Rouge stages like halted my momentum. And I think I kind of resented them for that. But when you told me to just like stop and relax and explore the stage and use the hints, I got a better appreciation of a different type of level design in a Sonic game than like the action or the mech stages, because those are designed to funnel you through basically to the end. Whereas with the hunt stages, you do get to utilize Knuckles and his abilities to kind of explore a more open area that compared to a lot of the other levels. So they were still a source of frustration for me, but less frustration. I think I grew to appreciate them as my playthrough went on. And like you said, I think the music in the Knuckles stages is definitely a highlight because, like you said, they do have a lot of that hip hop element in there. The one from the Pumpkin stage gets like stuck in my head.
Oh yeah,
like,
Pumpkin Hill is one of the best Knuckles stage. It's one of the best Sonic songs ever. Yeah, it's very good.
It's so good. But yeah, as far as playing the actual game, and again, coming from the internet where the internet's like, this game is a broken mess, it's terrible, it's impossible to play, I didn't experience any of that again. And I think I didn't experience as much of that as the internet would have me to believe. And even on the internet, when I was like looking at playthroughs and stuff, I didn't see as much of that like graphical like weirdness that would cause you to just like fly off the stage or like sink through the ground. That was not as present as much as it was in Sonic Adventure 1. So I really think they did a good job of fixing a lot of things for this game specifically. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
I did. I think also part of your Knuckles frustration, it's occurring to me now, is going from Sonic Adventure 1 to 2. In Knuckles stages in Sonic Adventure 1, you could mostly glide around the map and eventually get the radar to tick and find them. They were a little smaller. They were definitely less vertical. They were more horizontal. Whereas in this game, they're much more horizontal. The space is much bigger. The stages were like twice the size of the stages in the first game. And they put the hint TVs in all over the place and staggered them that you can only find certain ones when you're looking for certain gems to make it give you a direction. And I think you can't play these stages like you played the stages in the first game. They are designed differently. Also, something that I told you that it didn't occur to me until I looked it up is, unlike any other game that would have you find things, the engine that they used for Sonic Adventure 2 randomized where the shards are. So every time you play it, I think there's a set amount of them that it probably rotates through, but like there are set shard locations, but it's never the same place each time. And so if you die, or if you leave the stage and come back, it reshuffles everything. And so if I really got stuck where I was gliding around, the hints weren't helping, I couldn't find anything, I would die if I had extra lives, and then it might kick it to a different location, and then I could find it. And that was really helpful. Because again, in most other games, you would just Google now where the shard locations are and go find them. But this game circumvents that, which I think is really impressive for the time, but also kind of frustrating because then you literally, like the guides for the Knuckles and Rouge section says, I don't know, click on TVs, you'll find it eventually, which is just very funny to me.
Yeah, I did. I think this, when I messaged you, I kind of reached my peak frustration during the Death Chamber level for Knuckles. And that's when I kind of messaged you, and I was like, man, I am not enjoying these at all. And it's because I looked up a map of the level, and someone had made a diagram of the Death Chamber where it's kind of got like the 3 triangles and the central part that connects to all of them. And they had a very nicely color-coded map, and the green dots on the map were where like potential emeralds could show up. And there were, I couldn't even count them all. There were tons. So it seems like there are a ton of different locations that these emeralds can show up in. And yeah, I think that for the time, that's really impressive for the game to have so many, and a lot of them are like really close together. I can't imagine that they would alter too much from like death to death. And I did notice too that when you find one, if you die, then you still keep that one.
Yes, correct.
Well, so that's at least a very nice little touch there. Because if you died and they lost the emerald and then like you reshuffled every time, that would kind of be a pain in the butt. But that was one of your advices too. You're like, if you're just really struggling with one and you have some extra lives to spare, just like restart and it'll reshuffle them. And I did get some way better shuffles where I was able to find them much faster. So that is a viable strategy if you do have a decent number of lives. And even if you like run out of lives too on the Knuckles stage, they don't make progress in the same way that you make progress in the action stages or the mech stages, where if you die, you feel like, oh, I had to go all the way back to the start. For those stages, you're basically starting in the same spot, and you get the added benefit of maybe getting a better roll on the emerald locations, being able to find them easier.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my final thoughts on that. Additionally to gameplay, so there are 16 stages for each side, and what you can do is you can get a letter grade for each stage. When you complete the game, you can go back and play the 5 or 6 however many different missions there are for each stage, and try and get a letter grade on them. And you're supposed to try and get A ranks on all the stages, because supposedly if you get A ranks and collect 180 emblems, you can unlock Green Hill Zone as a secret playable stage. That's a nice little touch. I think that's really cool. But doing that seems like a really Herculean effort. Have you ever tried to engage with the grading system at all? Try to get all the A ranks and do all that? Is that even worth it, you think?
I mean, so for me, score chasing is a thing and a relic of a time when people had less games to play or didn't get as many new games. And so like I did more score chasing in my youth, as it were. And I did a lot of achievement hunting on the Xbox 360 because back then I was only playing a handful of games when I wasn't replaying Mass Effect for the 5th time. And so like I would chase those kinds of things, whereas now I never do. Like I didn't this playthrough. I imagine when I had them on the GameCube, I must have. I know that in Sonic Adventure 1, if you get all the emblems, you unlock Metal Sonic as a playable character.
Oh, yes.
Which is really cool because you do see Metal Sonic floating in like a Bacta tank, essentially, in one of the Eggman ship stages. In this, I didn't even know until you just said it that Green Hill Zone was in the game because I've never done it in this game. Also, I feel like it's a lot harder in this. Like the only stage I ever got a high rank on was one Eggman stage. I managed to get an A because I had gotten through it quickly. I didn't die. I didn't really get hit. But every other action stage, it was either C at the absolute highest, but usually D's and E's. But I mean, it doesn't affect the story, and I don't mind it. I mean, it's the same way, like when I play Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, I rarely get the platinum. I usually get gold or silver,
right.
Or even less copper. Or even Devil May Cry, like this double S rank, I almost never got. Like, it's just, that's not the thing. Like, I want to play the game the way I want to play it.
Right.
And score chasing does punish people for playing their way a little bit, but it's not so punishing that like you can't progress the game. At least it's another thing. And again, games of this era, especially the GameCube, PS2 era, like were designed to have extra modes and bonuses and multi missions, so you could like just sink tons of time into one game.
Right. Yeah, I think the highest grade I ever got on a stage was like a C. So I was really just kind of trying to take my time and enjoy them and really soak in the stages. The only reason I knew about the Green Hill Zone thing is because sometimes I'll just turn on gamer YouTube and let things go. And I came across a YouTuber named Alpharad. He does a lot of Pokemon Nuzlocke stuff, but Alpharad did the A ranks on all the stages and collect 180 emblems and unlock the Green Hill Zone. And that just seemed like such a Herculean effort to do that. It seems like something, like you said, back in the day when you had more time, when games were looking for ways to do things to reward replayability, that maybe seems like something, yes, younger me maybe would have gone after that. Older me, especially now, I don't think I have the time or the patience to be able to do that. So I'll watch the Green Hill Zone level on YouTube, and I'll enjoy it that way. And I think it's cool too that the different, like each stage does have like 4 or 5 like different mission parameters. Like I think one is like rings, one is like a speed run, and there's a couple different things in there. And it's nice that when you beat both the games, so you don't have to like go through the story to play all the stages. They just provide all the stages on like a actually pretty cool like selectable map to be able to go and play each stage and whatever mission you want to. And I can imagine it'd be pretty satisfying to watch all those missions like fill up with the A ranks and stuff. But yeah, to me, that's I know that's kind of always been a Sonic thing, is like the speed and the points and stuff. But I've never really tried to engage with that and be as good as I would want to be. And I'm not good at video games, so I probably would never be able to get all the A ranks anyways. So before we move on, Matt, because this conversation is great, but we're already past the hour mark. Is there anything you want to add about gameplay before we move on to the presentation?
No, just say that while we were chatting, I pulled up the bonus stage, and it is cool that like it's the whole stage rendered in 3D, and it starts as a side-scrolling stage very briefly until Sonic gets a little further in, and then it turns into the 3D like behind Sonic kind of look, which is a neat kind of bonus for old school Sonic fans. But no, I think we pretty much covered it. I think the game, like Sonic and Shadow's gameplay, is some of the tightest it's been in 3D Sonic. The homing attack is at its best here. It's pretty good in Sonic Adventure 1. I think it's almost near perfect here. I think they'll truly perfect it in Sonic Generations, which we're getting the remake of this year with Cross Shadow. But this is definitely up there as like the path towards perfecting that ability, which makes the platforming a joy and makes you feel cool while you're doing it. But yeah, I don't really think I have anything else to add. Like I said, I'm with you. Like I overall enjoyed my experience with this. I think the game, when we touch on the end, the gameplay of the final stage, the final stage, is I admire it and what it's trying to do, but in practice I struggled a lot with. But we'll get into that in a minute.
I'm glad you did bring up the homing attack, because yes, that was another point I had scribbled in the back of my brain. Compared to Shadow the Hedgehog, again, which I felt like the homing attack, I was almost afraid to use it because it was kind of unreliable at points. There was never one point in my playthrough of Sonic Adventure 2 where I felt like the homing attack screwed me over and killed me. It was the most reliable thing that I had in my entire kit, which it probably should be when you're playing a Sonic game. But yeah, whatever happened between Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog to make the homing attack not home, I don't know what happened, but that's travesty. But yeah, I'm glad we're kind of on the same page. Let's go over to presentation. I don't think there's not too much to cover here, so we should be able to get through this pretty briskly. Audio and visual presentation. Obviously, comparing this to the game that just came before it, Sonic Adventure 1. For this era, what do you think about the game graphically, audio-wise? Some general thoughts on that. Do you think it improves over Sonic Adventure 1? Do you think it still stands up today? Whatever direction you want to take that in.
So, is it an improvement over Sonic Adventure 1? No, but I don't think it's worse either. My issue here is that they're very different. Sonic Adventure 1, the sprites were still pretty cartoony. Sonic was a little shorter and stubbier. Like, they were designed to look like kind of cartoony versions of the characters, where the whole design ethos for this game and Sonic games to go forward is like, this is the beginning of them to have kind of more humanoid proportions, longer arms, longer legs, and move kind of like humans. And in some of the great scenes, it looks awesome. But in some of the more awkward scenes, like, they look like they're noodles, like hanging next to their body. Like, it doesn't always look great. I don't think it's aged poorly by any means. I just think that, again, the mouth flaps we talked about this in the unreleased project that we will talk about more later. Like, mouth flaps for early 3D games are tough. And they're tough here. Most of the time they look okay. The sound mixing is definitely better than Sonic Adventure 1. Like, you can hear the dialogue over the music. I also used, I always use subtitles, which helps. But, like, I think that most of the time the characters look good in motion. The cutscenes look good in motion. But it definitely is designed to look differently than Sonic Adventure 1. It's meant to look more quote unquote realistic with giant humanoid hedgehogs. And I didn't mind it. I mean, I think that characters like Knuckles and Rouge look better because they're so much more kind of angular, whereas like Sonic and Shadow, especially their faces, the way their eyes move and the way their mouths move, are meant to kind of mimic a more humanoid, human look, like a flatter face, and so it just ended up looking weird sometimes. So again, I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's different, but I think it does still hold up. It definitely, like, obviously the more modern Sonic games look much better, but like, this is an important step in the evolution, and I think it still looks good for what it is.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think on the visual side, I was saying that I felt like there was slight visual improvements in Sonic Adventure 1, but now that I think about it, they are kind of a little bit more, the styles are kind of distinct from one another. I think a big game where a big place where the game does improve over the first one is in its cutscene presentation in general. Yes. Mm-hmm. The cutscenes in Sonic Adventure 1 feel like they just kind of happen like in the game engine.
Yeah.
And characters didn't really like move around too much, and like you said, the lip flaps and stuff like that. The cutscenes in this aren't very long, but I feel like they made more of an effort with things like just like the choreography and the shots and the character movements, and having the characters have like unique animations in the cutscenes. Whereas, like I said, in Sonic Adventure 1, it just felt like it was happening just like, it was still the game engine, but they just like put some black bars on top and bottom, and like that was it. So I think that added a level of like polish and, like you said, realism, as you know, we were trying to go for humanoid hedgehogs here, that the first game didn't have. My notes on kind of how I felt the visuals were tightened up now, I'm kind of second guessing myself, because the more I think about Sonic Adventure 1, it is distinct from number 2. I think I prefer Sonic Adventure 2 better. I think, this is what year that was. This was 2 years after Sonic Adventure 1. I feel like they made some strides
for sure
in the 2 years since Sonic Adventure 1. I think they just had some things a little bit more figured out. I felt like cutscenes were more cleaned up. Like you said, the audio presentation, the big thing we hammered on was, the mixing wasn't that great. I felt the mixing was a lot better. There's never a point where I was like feeling like the characters needed to yell over the music for me to hear them. And even in the stages, I felt there's no point where I felt like the music was absolutely overpowering. The exception I have for music is Aquatic Mine, though.
Yes.
Oh my God, the bubble popping sound over the music was driving me up a wall. It was like if somebody just played this in a jail cell and they were torturing me, I would tell them any information that I wanted to. That was the one time I got like really super annoyed with it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, when I got back to Aquatic Mind, it all came back to me, and I ended up having to mute the game while playing that stage, and just look for when the radar would flash. It's awful. For those who have not played it, Aquatic Mind, which actually has really good music, also has this bubble popping sound effect that just plays constantly. It doesn't stop. I don't know if that was a glitch of the original game or what, but like I reloaded the stage a couple times just to make sure I wasn't getting an audio glitch, and it plays over and over again, drowning out the music, the dialogue, everything. It's just kind of omnipresent, and it's one of the hardest stages to get through because of that.
Does the track have the bubble popping on it, or is the
No.
track just the? It doesn't.
Track is just the music. It has some of the bubble popping like in the background of the music,
but not as obnoxious.
But yeah, it's not constant and nonstop.
That's fascinating because like the background music, when I could hear over the bubble popping, I was like, oh, this is fine. But just the constant barrage of the bubble popping sound, I was like, man, this is not great. That's my only kind of exception. But the rest of the soundtrack I thought was really great. This is where we get some of the most iconic Sonic tracks in the entire series from. Obviously, we have like Live and Learn, Escape from the City are probably the two that people know the most. But there was never a point, like I said, with the exception of the Aquatic Mind, but that's not necessarily the song's fault at all. There's never a point where I was just kind of annoyed with the stage music, or I thought that the stage music or the background music didn't fit what was going on. I thought that everything was composed well to match what was going on, match the seriousness of any situation, match the theme of any given stage. And like I said, I mean, we were messaging even today. I was like, I got my gym playlist, got the Sonic Adventure 2 playlist in the gym today, and got me pumped up a little bit. I was like, oh, maybe I could hit some personal bests today. I didn't. Because I'm in the process of getting back to being healthy and athletic. But overall, it's a good listen. It's great music. I think the rest of the series definitely takes inspiration from what has been established here in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, because this is kind of the direction that the music goes on for the rest of the games, at least from what I've experienced and heard, especially, you sent me those tracks from Sonic Frontiers, and you want to make some points on that, so I'll pass over to you to make some points on that. But this has kind of established the formula of music for 3D Sonic going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So Sarah Moonen and Jeff Moonen, Sarah Moonen, who's our associate producer, and Jeff's wife, and Jeff, my co-host on Fun and Games, the three of us went to see the Sonic Symphony when they toured this year. And it was incredible. But something I didn't quite realize was how integral Sonic's music is to me. I'm an emotional music listener, so I cried my way through a lot of that concert. Mm-hmm. But when I saw it, so it opens with medleys of classic Sonic stages, orchestrated, showing clips behind on a screen. And they did some stuff from Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic Mania. And it was just really fun to hear these orchestrated versions of these, chiptune songs. But then at the halfway point, at the intermission, a rock band comes out, and the whole second half is the Bud Rock kind of heavy metal side of the Sonic. They opened with I Am All of Me from Shadow the Hedgehog.
Hell yeah.
With a Year of the Shadow graphic, which I filmed in its entirety for one Ken Shepard of Kotaku, because he loves Shadow more than any other human I've ever met. And the song rocks. But that reminded me, and then I got wrapped up in, as the concert goes on, which, if you go to the Fun and Games podcast page, we did a whole episode afterwards talking about our experience at the concert, which was a lot of fun. And we talk about this in much more detail. This evolution of Sonic music is kind of really great. And what this game solidifies after Sonic Adventure is that Bud Rock and heavy metal are integral, but just other genres of music are integral to Sonic. And I sent you those heavy metal tracks because mostly it's because those play during mostly the boss battles in Frontiers, which I just want to say, the modern convention that Supersonic is a stage or gameplay mechanic, and in the way of doing boss fights and not just a thing you can have on a stage. I know a lot of people lament, but I think it's way cooler because those stages become so much more cinematic. And so these boss fights you do as Supersonic in Frontiers. And if I had sent you those songs and they didn't have the artwork for a Sonic game, would you just guess there's some new metal band, or would you have known they were Sonic songs?
That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I'll admit I had heard them before, because I remember when Sonic Frontiers came out. Literally one of the things, I got a shout out to Brock Matthews in my Discord server, fantastic voice actor, another Sonic super fan. He was raving. He's like the soundtrack is fucking incredible. And I think I went and listened to it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is actually really awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to send you those songs because I'd heard one of the ones I sent you. I was like, this is a Linkin Park track. It's obviously not, but right. it felt like a Linkin Park track. Just the structure, the screaming metal, all of it. It was just with the melodic choruses. I love that soundtrack. I think Sonic Frontiers is one of the best Sonic soundtracks and gets kind of overlooked, especially because a lot of those lyrical driven stuff. But yeah, this is the second game that really establishes Crush 40 as like the voice of Sonic, especially for the title screens, because they did the title screen for they did Open Your Heart for the first game, and they did Live and Learn for this game, and they would continue to do that for almost every Sonic game through the next few generations. Like, some of the best things about the storybook games on Wii, which is literally nothing, is the opening title songs. Getting to hear the song from Sonic and the Black Knight live with like a call and response moment from the band at the concert was amazing. It made me love that song even more. And so like, I'm really nerdy about the Sonic music, if you couldn't tell. And like, I literally have a playlist called Sonic Rocks that I constructed of pretty much all the lyrical songs from Sonic games.
Hell yeah.
It doesn't have everything, but it has a lot of it, especially my favorites. But like, even Lovely Gate, which is on the Egg Quarter stage, is this kind of modern jazz fusion track. Same with I'm a Spy from Security Hall, the Security Hall stage. Like, there's tons of electronic horns in those songs. It's just really kind of brilliant. And we were talking about it before, but Pumpkin Hill is just a fun rap song. It's a rap song about Knuckles. It's literally sung from the perspective of Knuckles, which, yes, I did also get to hear live at the Sonic Symphony concert, and
amazing.
It was with a symphony backing it, like a rock band and a symphony backing Pumpkin Hill. It was incredible. But yeah, I think that during gameplay, the music is a great background, but I don't know that I listened to it and went, these sound great. But when I re-listened to the soundtrack in its entirety today, before we recorded, I was like, oh no, a lot of these songs are really great. But they fit the mood of the game, but I think even on their own, they stand out. And that's a lot of Sonic music. I've gotten into arguments as to what has better music, Sonic or Mario. I think it's non-comparable because I love Koji Kondo, but the kind of music he makes for most Mario songs are not pop or rock in the same way that the Sonic songs are. Like, he did Jump Up Superstar, which is an incredible song from Mario Odyssey. But like, a lot of Koji Kondo stuff has poppy stuff to it, but in a kind of different way. I feel like Sonic leans more into genreification, and I think that's okay. And I think it makes stuff pop in a really unique way. And so, yeah, I love this soundtrack. I think it's one of my favorite modern Sonic soundtracks. I don't think it's the best one. I think there are other games I still love more, but I really do like this soundtrack a lot.
I'm glad you said that, because as you're talking about it, I kind of, the whole point of Sonic was to be different than Mario. That was the whole selling point of Sonic originally. Is like, hey, this is not Mario. This is different than Mario. He's cooler. He's hipper. He's got an attitude. That whole type of thing. And that, again, that's not discounting anything that Koji Kondo ever did, because the man is a legend,
of course.
But I would, and again, here I go trying to talk about music when I am certainly not qualified to do so. Yes, Koji Kondo draws inspiration from so many different things when he composes all of Mario's soundtracks, and all of Mario's soundtracks always have this kind of sense of grandeur, and they're so unique to what Mario does specifically. I would still call that more like traditional video game composing, whereas I'm glad you mentioned genreification, because that's what it feels like, and it brings like modern music into the Sonic franchise, and that kind of differentiates it from Mario, who has always had like his own soundtracks, and it's been very traditional composition, at least from my point of view. But like you said, Jump Up Superstar, that song, I fucking love that song. That song is incredible. But yeah, everything between Mario and Sonic is like so unique to their franchises, and they're not trying to do the same thing that the other is doing. So yeah, kind of comparing them doesn't really do one or the other justice, because they're both great in their own way. And I'm glad that Sonic didn't try to like go that path of chasing, oh, this is what Mario does, so this is what we have to do. This fits the theme and tone of Sonic so much better. And part of these games' legacy specifically is establishing that for the series going forward, and I really love it.
You know me, the fighting freak Knuckles, and we're at Pumpkin Hill. You ready? I ain't gonna let it get to me. I'm just gonna creep down in Pumpkin Hill. I got to find my lost piece. I know that it's here. I can sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel. I can't see a thing, but it's around somewhere. I'm gonna hold my head, cause I have no fear. This probably seems crazy, a graveyard theory. Our ghosts try to approach me and got leery.
far as the story goes, I mentioned it. We both mentioned it a little earlier in the episode. The story is split between the hero and the dark paths. Requires you to play both to get the full picture and the final stage, and to find out what is actually going on, and sets up kind of the cliffhanger for the rest of the story going forward. I mentioned during gameplay, I think the hero and dark path is good for the gameplay. I do think it hurts the storytelling just a little bit, and I mentioned the video by Pariah695. There's a really awesome mod out there where you can play the game in story order. That'd probably be best served for like a different playthrough, a second or third playthrough. The first time you should play it through, I think, style it off in those two paths. I think that's the best way to do it. But playing with that mod seems to be a good way to kind of wrap your head around the story and what is going on. The story in this game, based on like what I've played and my understanding of where the story goes from like the first Sonic the Hedgehog all the way up to Sonic Adventure 1, there's definitely a shift in tone for Sonic Adventure 2. Everything seems bigger, like the stakes feel bigger. The government is involved with what's going on here. We're going into space. The moon gets blown up. And all this kind of stems back to what Shiro Maikawa wanted to do with his interpretation of a Sonic story, where he wanted to take the story. Considering this is the year of Shadow, we get his full backstory, and it fills in a lot of the questions I had around where his character ended up in Shadow the Hedgehog. I have a better understanding of where he came from now, having like played the game and sat down and kind of digested the story, as when I just did my brief research for the Shadow the Hedgehog game. And this includes like Shadow's backstory with Maria and the reason why he feels the way he does towards humans, and his role in, like you said, we discover that Shadow was created by Gerald Robotnik, Eggman's grandfather, and Robotnik had all these other kind of plans he's working on in the background. I think the most critical thing that I really grew to kind of appreciate was the Sonic and the Shadow dynamic, and them giving Sonic a rival that kind of mirrors who he is. And I know Keith and I kind of talked about how Sonic's always kind of had like a rival character. It was originally Knuckles, and then it kind of was Knuckles until Shadow kind of came into the picture here. But just kind of that time period of the early 2000s, and just thinking about how storytelling was done in animation back then, giving the hero kind of like the anti-hero rival to kind of like test them and push them is a pretty common trope. And I see it here in the way that they introduce Shadow to kind of be the mirror of Sonic the Hedgehog, like how they did, Vegeta and Goku, or I mentioned on the Shadow episode, like Kaiba and Yugi, or Gary Oak and Ash Ketchum. Even in a more kid-friendly anime like Pokemon, they had this rival trope, and that's been a staple in those games basically for the entire series. I've kind of rambled, Matt. What are your thoughts here on kind of the story, where it kind of goes, and what are your thoughts about like the introduction of Shadow as a character here?
I mean, I really like the story. I like Shadow. I think it's funny you bring up Dragon Ball Z, because there's a lot of complaints about like what purpose does Knuckles serve now that he's not the rival? But that's that's Sonic's whole ethos, is he makes friends of his enemies. And like
that's exactly what happens in Dragon Ball too.
Right. And that's why I think he's the Goku of the video game universe. He really does befriend his enemies. And like that's even a major plot point of Sonic Prime, the Netflix series I mentioned, is that him and Shadow were rivals in that, but they eventually team up for the greater good. And like that's basically what ends up happening with Shadow throughout his story eventually. But I like Shadow as a character. I think he's really interesting. I think I'm really excited for the new movies to explore this, because like the first movie was very light on Sonic lore, but the second one went balls to the walls when they introduced Knuckles. And so I think the third one, especially with Keanu voicing him, like they're going to get some good stuff, and it's going to be really interesting. I'm sure it's going to be fun and goofy, just like the first two, because it's going to be a kid's movie at its heart. But like, I like Shadow as a character. Like, it's very easy to look at him and go, more edgy Sonic, who cares? But honestly, when you learn about Maria and like what the humans and guns specifically did to Maria and did to him, his vengeance is understandable, and also his story arc makes a lot of sense. I like the plot in the game as a whole. I think that it does get a little in the weeds a little bit, but again, as veteran Kingdom Hearts fans, I think we got through it just okay.
I live in the weeds. I get it.
But like, I really do. Like, I agree. I think Sonic Adventure 1 was kind of just a classic Sonic ROM. Eggman has finds a thing, the thing gets beyond his control, Sonic has to save the world. Like, the final stage of Sonic Adventure 1 is still one of the most cinematic and cool moments ever in video games. It doesn't always work the way it should, but like, and I like that we get that in this game, which I know we're going to get to before we wrap up, but like, I think as a whole, the basic narrative is done really well. My critiques are with specific characters within the narrative. Some of them aren't done justice. Some of them are just straight up not here, which drives me a little crazy, because they do come back for later games, but they were just MIA here. But I don't have major complaints about the overall story. My complaints come in when talking about specific characters.
I think I would agree with you. There are points in the story where there are some kind of like plot hole things that happen, such as like when they're on the Space Colony arc and like Sonic blows up so basically the premise is they go to the Space Colony arc and it has this giant Death Star type of laser on it that Eggman kind of seizes control of and like blows up the moon, and then there's like a show of power, and then basically threatens to blow up the Earth if the Earth doesn't like surrender to him like being like the world leader or dictator or whatever. So definitely ballsy play for Eggman for sure. He's come a long way from just putting animals in robots. Now we're blowing up the Earth. So the stakes are, like I said, a lot bigger in Sonic Adventure 2, for sure. There's a couple like little plot hole things that happen where it's like, this doesn't really make sense why these specific things like happen. But I mean, again, Kingdom Hearts, I'm willing to like overlook that. I think that it's a pretty strong story overall. The pace can be a little bit fast at times. Like there's moments that happen in the cutscene where like something happens and the next thing happens. Like several things happen in a row, and you get just presented with like so much information. You're just like, whoa, okay, like that was just kind of gave me whiplash, and you kind of have to process it before you get into like the next stage that's going on. Shadow specifically, because that's kind of the focus of the year of Shadow. I mentioned at the end of Shadow the Hedgehog that I didn't think where he ended up in that game kind of served any real arc that he may have had over this game, Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog. I think what he does in this game is a lot better, because I feel like he has more of like a natural kind of arc to him, to where he ends up at the end of this game, which kind of segues nicely into Heroes, and I'll probably have to play that too to kind of wrap my brain around that. But he goes from this kind of like revenge-driven. He has this desire for revenge because of what the humans did to Maria. Like obviously Gunn didn't like the research that Robotnik was doing. They raid the space colony, which ends up getting Maria killed, and that kind of drives not only Shadow but Gerald Robotnik to basically hate all humans. And we kind of come to discover, as Shadow encounters Sonic more, he kind of like recovers some more of his memories, and Sonic and Shadow both kind of figure out like who they are as characters in relation to one another. He discovers that Maria actually wanted him to like protect the world and take care of the humans so that they could have happy lives. And then that kind of goes on to define like his set of morals, his set of ethics, that this person who I cared about, who is now killed by the humans, even though she was killed by the humans, she still wanted me to like protect them. And he wanted to do right by her, not necessarily because he cared about the humans, but he cared about Maria, who cared about the humans. And I think on the flip side of that coin, it's interesting too that in the first handful of Sonic games we've had, going back all the way to Genesis, Sonic has always been just like a force of nature. There's never been anything that he's come up against that he has not been able to overcome with, I would say, probably relative ease. And this is kind of the first game, I guess you could say Chaos in Sonic Adventure 1 is kind of a threatening force to him. This is the first time where he comes up against someone who, in the first scene that we see them in the city and Shadow initially uses like the Chaos Control, kind of outdoes everything Sonic throws at him. And it really kind of puts Sonic in this interesting space where he's kind of like, this has never happened to me before. And I really like that for his character specifically, because when you have kind of like these static characters that we know what they're about and they kind of get this loop thrown at them, I think there's good opportunity for like storytelling in there. So I really like the dynamic that it sets up between these two specifically. And right away when they first meet as well, it's not like, oh, that's evil. That's like the evil Sonic and I'm the good Sonic. It sets up this real like, I wouldn't, like I said, it's more of like a rivalry. It's more of like, it's not like a pure antagonist. It's more like Sonic as the good and Shadow is kind of like this morally gray kind of mystery who you could see how he would have his set of morals and ethics would lead him to clash with what Sonic does as he's like chasing his own goals and kind of discovering who he is as a person. If any of that rambling made any sense.
It does. It does. It does make sense though. And like, well, I think the thing here also is like, again, I love Mario. We don't have to keep comparing them, but I just want to say Mario in the mainline Mario games gets next to zero character development. He gets some, but very little. In the RPGs, different story. Mario gets a ton of character development. So does Luigi. But in the mainline games, because they're not really narrative driven, right? It's Bowser did a thing. Mario has to go stop Bowser. That's where it ends. The thing that I would always say about the Sonic games, especially in the modern 3D space, they've always leaned into narrative growth, complex characters. This is the beginning of the arc where Sonic can't just, react and get through something. He needs to think. He needs help. And that just happens more and more as the stories go on. It becomes a drawing from his friends, kind of, the power of my friends kind of narrative, which is pretty tropey. But like, this is the first time Sonic has encountered something, like you said, that he kind of hits a brick wall and he's like, oh, I can't just use my speed here. I need something else. And that continues to happen. And again, why I love Frontiers as a game is that game has a lot of reflection on Sonic's history. The folks who wrote the Archie comics that have been running forever, the IDW comics, wrote that most recent game. And so it kind of spends a lot of time reflecting on previous adventures too, which is interesting. So yeah, I agree. I think like my biggest complaints here with the narrative is a few things. So first, and we both have notes on this, Amy is a character in the first game, not perfect, still lusting after Sonic, but her story and Gamma's story are some of the best stories in Sonic, just because of the revelations they give and like how they tell their narrative. First of all, the fact that Gamma's not here and Big's not here except in some cameos drives me crazy. I like both those characters. I'm sad that they were just nowhere to be found here. But Amy, in the first game, while she's still, basically lusting after Sonic, saying someday you'll marry me, which I just hate. Like, because it's so one-sided and Sonic doesn't want to be with her. It's like the, ew, girls are gross. Oh, I'm a boy, crazy girl. Like very basic, written by a man probably narrative. But it's worse in this game. Like in the first game, it was like, there were spots of it, but mostly she still got to help tell a story with Birdie and something else. In this, she's not even a playable character, and it's her whole narrative arc. Also, just as a side note, I love how people keep confusing Shadow and Sonic, where if you look at them for more than 10 seconds, they look nothing alike. Like, Gun arrests Sonic because they think he's Shadow, and then later in the dark playthrough, at one point, Amy thinks Shadow is Sonic and tries to hug him and then realizes it's not him. And I'm just like, yeah, they don't look alike. But like in this, Amy is there to be a damsel in distress, to obsess over Sonic, and literally serve no other purpose. It's really disappointing. And thankfully, she's gotten some agency since. Still not perfect, but she's gotten to do more in the later games. And eventually, like, I don't know if she's still boy crazy now. I would have to think about if she's even in Sonic Forces. She's definitely not, I don't think, in how her role is in Sonic Frontiers. I think they reflect on that a bit also, which is great. But she's just like such a girl written by guys character in this. And I'm speculating. There could have been women in the writer's room for this, but I don't think so. Just because of the way she is, I just can't imagine a woman writing this, because she's just the typical cartoony archetype of boy crazy girl who thinks about nothing but marrying the hero and has literally like fails the Bechdel test after one word, and by herself without even another woman. So yeah, that's my biggest complaint about this game character wise.
Yeah, I agree with you, and especially because I think Amy's narrative was really strong in Sonic Adventure 1, and I think they have gotten better. Like I said, I haven't played any of the later Sonic games, but I have watched a full playthrough of Sonic Boom. I've seen some of like the memes about like around the Sonic Boom show and some of the later shows where they portray Amy, and she seems to be like at least trending in the right direction. Yeah. They're doing her a little bit better service. I'm glad you brought up the the confusing Sonic for Shadow thing, which is the original reason why Sonic was in the helicopter at the start of the Cityscape sequence. I think that's really funny because anybody would take you like 5 seconds to look at Sonic and Shadow and be like, yeah, they're. I mean, their body type is similar, but their character, like, they look completely different.
Yeah.
A couple of videos I watched on like the story and the development, there's some thought as to maybe that while they were writing the story, that Shadow's original design was like maybe closer to Sonic's. And when they finally settled on the final design for Shadow, maybe like that portion of the story just didn't get like rewritten or reworked or whatever. Maybe that's possible. There was also like, I kind of went down like the lore fan theory hole where like they were saying the government or Gun was trying to cover up the fact that Shadow escaped. So they were just like kidnapping Sonic and making him like take the fall for it. Which, I mean, that's a nice theory. Usually I subscribe to the fact that like if I'm not explicitly told in the game, like that's probably not what happened. I'm leaning towards more that Shadow probably went through several redesigns while the story was getting written, and the one they landed on was just so visually distinct from Sonic, they just kind of left that part of the story, and it's not that big of a deal at all.
Right. I mean, I think also, though, they both move really fast, and so I could see if you see a blur that's bluish black, maybe confusing it that way, but there are many scenes where they're standing still and people can't tell the difference. That's just very funny to me.
I also kind of like Tails' arc in this story too, because Tails' arc kind of has kind of a nice arc for Tails between Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, because he's always seen as like the sidekick character, and in Sonic Adventure 1 he starts to learn to be like more independent from Sonic, and we see in Sonic Adventure 2 like that continues. Like the first time we see Tails, he's on his way to Prison Island to save Sonic from the government. He's just flying there like by himself. And at the end, when we get to when he confronts Eggman on the Space Colony arc, and we think that, oh no, Eggman traps Sonic in like the tube and like drops him from the Space Colony arc like into the Earth's atmosphere to like die, and we see the capsule explode off screen. We think that Sonic is dead. Ooh, Tails kind of steps up to like fight and finish off Eggman in Sonic's place, and I thought that was like a really cool moment for him, like stepping out of Sonic's shadow and being more like independent. They also kind of took a lot of Tails' like weird quirky character traits, like the Max in this game too, to the point where he was like a guy who like liked tinkering and like a mechanic and stuff, to like being full blown like, oh, I made this fake Chaos Emerald from like scratch, and that just kind of like made me laugh. I thought that was like the funniest thing, where he's just like, oh, by the way, I just happened to make this fake Chaos Emerald in like my spare time. Just like Tails, what are you doing? That's like, you're messing with like the fabric of reality. Like, slow down, buddy. It's getting a little weird there. But yeah, I think most of the characters have done pretty well. Even Rouge. Amy was my biggest point of concern. There's a little part of me. I mean, I love Knuckles' inclusion. I understand why he's here for like gameplay reasons. I don't really feel like he had that big of an impact on the story overall. Other than like, this game is very obviously like has the themes of rivals, and each character has like a rival character. So obviously like Sonic and Shadow, other than him to be the rival character for Rouge, it just seems like every moment he's like running off to like find something, or it's like when he has all of the shards of the Master Emerald, when they fly to the space colony, they like get hit with an asteroid and like all the shards fly out. And then Knuckles is like, well, you guys, like, screw you guys, I'm off to find the shards of the Master Emerald again. So that's the only part where I feel like, I mean, you could realistically take Knuckles out of the story and it'd probably be fine. But I understand for like gameplay reasons why they wanted to have him in there, because A, he's like a popular character, and 2, you want to have that gameplay variety. So
yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the Master Emerald's lore and him being the guardian of the Master Emerald, and like that it's designed to neutralize the Chaos Emeralds. And they do mention that in like the final push for the story. And so like, they do. There is some lore implications, but I agree, he's not as big a part of the narrative. This narrative was designed to feature Sonic and Shadow and then fill in the gaps. And I think Knuckles got the least to do, because even Rouge turns out to be a spy for the government and not really a treasure hunter, though she is still obsessed with jewels. Another not great writing for the other female character to be obsessed with shiny things and jewels. But but she otherwise like has a character arc and depth, and so that's fun. Whereas Knuckles, I just want to save the Master Emerald. But Knuckles' bit has always been, I just want to be alone. I want to guard the Master Emerald, and it's not till Sonic brings him over to the crew that he's like, oh, I guess I can have friends. And so I think that all interplays. I think this game, before we got like the later cartoon, because I think Sonic X started to air around the same time as this, which basically is the Sonic Adventure world with some tweaks and some other things. Like this game really solidified the small quirks that each character had into full-blown character traits. Like you said, Tails becomes the genius that he is in this game, not just a tinkerer. Knuckles kind of becomes the hard-headed, stubborn himbo that he'll grow to be in later iterations, which I actually quite adore. And even Robotnik here, like, the maniacal side of him really comes out, and he becomes this exaggerated cartoon that will later even get worse in later games in the best way, and will give the groundwork for Jim Carrey's performance, which, yes, is still more over the top than probably warrant is needed, but you have Jim Carrey, but also isn't that far afield from how wild and quirky Dr. Eggman is in the later games especially. And so I do like that for the best and worst traits, this game does lay the groundwork for that. It will take Amy, I think, another several games and many years to crawl out of that hole. But like, I hate to keep referencing the show, but it's on the mind because I'm watching it. Amy is a major character in Sonic Prime as well, and she is portrayed excellently throughout the entire series. One of my favorite characters in the show because of how she's shown. So they do eventually figure it out. And I think in the IDW comics, which admittedly I have only read very sparing issues of, she's much better in that. And there are a lot better female characters in that run too, versus the older games. She was originally designed in Sonic CD to be the Princess Peach of Sonic, basically the person to rescue. Thankfully, we've grown from that.
Absolutely.
Do we want to take some time to talk about the final act of this game?
Yeah, you said you had some stuff you wanted to mention about it, and I think my knowledge of the final act stuff is at its weakest, so I'll let you mention that stuff. So if you have any thoughts on the final act, go ahead and mention it. I'll kind of add in where I think that I can, because I just barely finished this game yesterday. It came screeching over the finish line. So yeah, let's talk about the final act and kind of where that leaves like Sonic and Shadow and everybody, in case I decide to go forward and do the next Sonic Heroes episode.
Yeah, so I mean, like the first game, when you beat all the paths of the different characters, Super Sonic becomes an unlockable story path, and the climax of the game is you fighting Chaos as a giant monster as Super Sonic. And this is the beginning of Super Sonic becoming a narrative hook as well as just a gameplay mechanic. And in this game, they do the same thing. In the final act, there's this push where you play as every character in a row, one of the hardest stages to get through because you have a shared life pool with every character except Shadow. The checkpoint is when you get to play a Shadow, and I had to do it over many times because I would die on the Knuckles stage a bunch or whatever. But you make this final push, you realize that the ship is hurtling towards the Earth, and it's going to destroy the Earth if you don't do it, and everyone decides to team up. This is where Shadow's arc kind of shifts for him to be an ally. And then the very final stage is Sonic and Shadow fighting as Super Sonic and Super Shadow to fight the prototype of the ultimate life form, which Shadow is, the Bio Lizard, which was like the first creature created. The Bio Lizard fight is interesting. You do it as Shadow. He's got like wires on his back that you grind rail on to like hit his weak spot.
Yeah.
It's definitely harder than it needs to be, but it's definitely an interesting boss fight in a game with absolutely atrocious boss fights. Like none of them are particularly interesting because you're either fighting other characters or like mechs from Gun, and none of them are really fun to do. This was at least an interesting boss fight that was like stylish and fun. It ended up giving me more trouble than I'd like to admit. And then the Bio Lizard uses Chaos Control to teleport, but gets lodged in the space station and becomes part of it. And so you go out into space as Sonic and Shadow with the power of the Chaos Emeralds to fight him off. And it's this cool dual protagonist thing where while you're fighting as one of them, the other one is quote unquote gathering rings because your rings can't count down. And you have to like hit, there are like these weak spots on the Bio Lizard that you have to hit within the ring time limit to then jump over to the other character. If you don't and timer gets low, it'll jump back to the other character anyway. And when you come back to that character again, you'll have almost no rings. And in execution, it was clunky, but I love this idea. I love that basically Supersonic is, like we said, Dragon Ball Z now at this point, is like, it's the ultimate form. He uses it like Super Saiyan and like can defeat anything. And I really love it as a story mechanic because I'm a sucker for that stuff. I grew up on Dragon Ball Z. I love it. And it does give a reason for Sonic and Shadow to fight together. After you do this fight, you use like your ultimate blast to defeat the Bio Lizard, and Sonic ends up getting back to the space station while Shadow falls to the Earth, and we assume Shadow died on reentry. Like, we don't know what happened to him. He falls unconscious and falls back to Earth. And that's kind of where the game lives his story, as like the other characters talk about their like resolution of the story and like where they are and like how they feel about what's transgressed. And like Sonic even monologues a little bit about Shadow and like coming around to thinking that he wasn't so bad, like that he was misunderstood, that kind of cliche, but it really works here. It's the saccharine sweet kind of stuff that Sonic does in its narrative. But like, I really like it. I like the ending. I think it's kind of cheesy, but I think both Sonic Adventure games are quite cheesy. That's kind of what you have to love that about these games, because they're kind of doing it unironically. That's how they were designed. But I love this final act. Like I said, the gameplay doesn't quite hold up to my expectations of how awesome it is, but it does. When you get it right, it definitely does feel awesome.
I think so. I gotta say, I didn't really know what to expect going into this final level. The fact that boss ended up being, like you said, the ultimate life form the prototype of the ultimate life form was this giant lizard, definitely caught me off guard. I was not expecting that at all. But I think you're right about it. I think the idea of it is way cooler and works better than like the actual like execution of it. As far as like, what am I trying to say here? God, it's late. I'm getting tired. Shadow fighting what was the prototype of the ultimate life form before him, I think does a lot for his character. I think that fight specifically does a lot for his character, because it's kind of during that fight that he kind of starts to like, maybe not reclaim, but understand what his identity is. And he's like, I'm Shadow the Hedgehog. I am the ultimate life form. Like, this is, funnily enough, in Shadow the Hedgehog, this is who I am, as he likes to famously say in that game. And he kind of is able to like establish his own identity alongside of the identity that he has because of his memories with Maria. And it's because of this fight. It's because of fighting the thing that preceded him before he was known as the ultimate life form. And then when they take that fight, like you said, the giant lizard fuses with the Space Colony Arc, which again, did not see that coming. Just a wild, crazy turn. And then the way that Shadow and Sonic both use the Chaos Emeralds together to achieve Super Shadow and Super Sonic. Again, I mentioned Shadow as kind of like a mirror to Sonic, and the fact that they're willing to give Shadow in his first game the Super Shadow state is kind of put him on equal footing with Sonic is very, very cool. And for both of them, both of their characters, I think that last fight does a lot. And like you said, at the end, we see Sonic saying, "Oh, like maybe he wasn't that bad." And throughout the end of the hero path, when you kind of, and the dark path, when you kind of fight Sonic during one of those last stages, your initial confrontation with Sonic, Shadow is not very like antagonistic towards him. He has a little bit of like respect for Sonic, and it's more of just like all right, well, let's prove and see like which one of us is better against one another. So I really think they leave this game, especially when you factor in this last part, everything that happens, except the cliffhanger we leave on is Shadow plummets to Earth and dies. I think they come to a point where, I wouldn't say that Shadow thinks of Sonic as like a friend or like a person he would like want to hang out with, but I think Shadow comes to respect Sonic as maybe somebody that is like on his level. Maybe Shadow wouldn't think that Sonic is on his level, but I think he respects what Sonic is and how he and Sonic kind of like have similar qualities and traits and do similar things. but Shadow's still able to like define himself as a character, and it's just like, oh, I'm not just like Sonic, like I am my own type of character. And that's kind of what I think about when I think about the finale of this game. And I really do like where it kind of leaves Shadow as a character in this game specifically. I don't have the middle piece of the puzzle, so I haven't played Sonic Heroes, so I don't really know what that does to get his character to where he is at the start of Shadow the Hedgehog. But in terms of his narrative specifically, I really like where they leave him in what he does and what happens to him in his growth in Sonic Adventure 2. Even after playing this game, I still feel like my thoughts on Shadow the Hedgehog are justified. I'm not the biggest fan of where they leave him in that game because, like I said, at the end of that game, you know, he just kind of determines to leave everything that defined him behind. That's why he lets the picture of Maria go. And that's basically him symbolizing that, you know, he's not going to let any of that stuff define him anymore. He's going to like define himself. And it kind of wastes this arc that he's on to just leave him at a point where he was like before any of these games happened, where I felt like he was before any of these games happened, because I think his introduction in Sonic Adventure 2 was really cool. And I really like him a lot more as a character now that I've gotten to experience like what his origin is and the things that he went through. And now I understand his backstory more. And it's frustrating to me is like where they leave him in Shadow the Hedgehog. And we're not even talking about how like Shadow the Hedgehog kind of retcons some of the stuff that happens in this game, because you discover in Shadow the Hedgehog that a lot of the stuff that Gerald Robotnik was doing was with the help of Black Doom, the antagonist of Shadow the Hedgehog, that kind of gets like retconned in later. So like as I was playing the whole time and like getting this information about Gerald Robotnik, I was like, yeah, but the Space Devil is also there with him. So but I think as far as like a debut for Shadow as a rival for Sonic, I think a lot of that stuff like works really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that unfortunately this is the best Shadow story will ever be. I'm hoping Cross Shadow Generations will give us some cool stuff. It looks like it's going to in the most recent trailer, because Sonic Generations' whole shtick is like this enemy, I think he's called Kronos or something like that, traps Sonic and his friends in this like limbo space, forcing them to relive important moments of their life. It's when classic Sonic and modern Sonic are together, and like that meme of the two of them meeting along with classic Tails and modern Tails. And so the Shadow part of it is, I think, also going to reflect on the previous Shadow games. But like Shadow, I can't speak to Heroes because I haven't played his arc in Heroes, but like it's great here. It's bad in Shadow the Hedgehog, the game. The storytelling is clunky at best, even if the stuff that I like about it. And then in the later games, he really doesn't get anything. In Sonic Forces, he's just kind of there. He gets bonus stages. Same for Frontiers, though I didn't play the most recent DLC for Frontiers, so that may not be the case. But like famously in the games since Sonic Adventure 2, he's kind of been tucked to the side. He was, I think, integral in Sonic 06, but because that game was so poorly received, it's often not really thought of, because technically your arc ends with Sonic 06, because he's a major character in that, but I don't think you want to play that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he is a major character in Sonic 06. Again, it was originally pitched as Sonic Adventure 3 and then grew into whatever it became, which is bizarre also because the design is so different and the story is so separate from other things. But anyway, it makes me sad to replay this and realize this is some of the best Shadow content we've ever gotten. But again, I can't speak to Heroes and some other things, but I do know that based on what I've seen of Generations and what I've heard through like previews and stuff, they're trying to, I think, redeem him a bit in Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, because even Sega's aware of kind of how sparse and poorly handled his narrative has been. So we'll see. I'm excited for it, but it is sad sometimes to think about how this is the strongest his character kind of really ever is, except in like other material, cartoons, comics, whatever. But like in the games, the main games, he just didn't get a ton to do.
I'm glad you elaborated on that, because I was going to ask that follow-up question about kind of what his role is in the games going forward. And I've watched and seen enough Sonic content around the future games to know that, yeah, I haven't really seen too much of him probably since I know he's a big part in Sonic 06, because I know you play as Sonic. There's a Sonic portion in that game, there's a Shadow portion, and there's a Silver portion.
Yeah.
of that game. I don't know if I'll ever work up the courage to go and play that. Although I know they are working on Project 06, which is kind of going through and fixing a lot of the issues with that game. Yeah. So maybe I would play it in that kind of format. But yeah, I think when they like announced the year of Shadow and Sonic Cross Shadow Generations and all that stuff, I think it piqued my interest because, again, you mostly hear about Sonic, but I know Shadow's a really popular character, but I can't ever remember in like the games that have come out recently seeing him. Was he in Sonic and the Black Knight as well? Was he in there?
Technically, so it's a King Arthur story. Sonic gets sucked into it, and all of the classic King Arthur characters are played by Sonic characters. So like one of them's Lancelot, one of them, and so I don't think Shadow's the Black Knight. He's one of the Knights of the Round Table, but I can't remember who.
So it's like they're using Shadow as like a proxy for a different character in a story, basically. But yeah, I can't ever remember. And like I know he made like Sonic is in Smash Bros. and Shadow's in Smash Bros. As an assist trophy. Yeah. So yeah, I think for as popular a character as he is, and I think it's good timing to do it now with the Sonic 3 movie coming out. I think that's really good timing to kind of maybe kind of, I wouldn't call it start a do-over with this character, but maybe just start to kind of establish him more firmly in the narrative, and maybe this is them working up to maybe he gets his own game again sometime in the near future. Maybe we can move past the first Shadow the Hedgehog game, and maybe Sega, if you're listening, just keep the guns out of it. I think I don't think Shadow needs guns.
He does not.
Do some other cooler stuff with them. That's just my opinion though. We are past 2 hours on Sonic Adventure 2, and this has been an awesome conversation. Matt, I'm just going to toss over to you real quick. I know I have this last section labeled Legacy and Impact on Sonic Franchise / Shadow and Closing Thoughts, but I'll just toss over to you and ask, do you have any kind of closing thoughts on Sonic Adventure 2, on Shadow the Hedgehog, on how important these games are to Sonic as a whole? Just any kind of thoughts like that, just to kind of close us out here.
Sure. So, I mean, I think that we've said it before, Sonic kind of gets a bad rap because there have been games that are hits or misses more than hits sometimes. But I think also it's an unfair comparison. I think that when Mario is mediocre, we just tend to sweep it under the rug. I think of the new Super Mario Brothers games, which the first one was fantastic, and then the other 5 were the same, and nobody complains about them. We just ignore them.
Thank you. I'm not alone. Thank you.
for as much as we want to make fun of Mario Sunshine, I think it's a flawed game, but I think it's no more flawed than some of the more average Sonic games. I think the problem is Sonic 06 was so colossally bad that it took him a while to recover from it. But like Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, and Sonic Forces are all fun games. Forces is the weakest of the 3, but they're great modern Sonic games, and even Sonic Unleashed, which was a cool concept, even though they mostly erased his history because it was Sonic in isolation without the other characters. It was a cool idea of like having these daytime stages that are regular running, jumping Sonic stages, and these nighttime stages where you're the werehog and you're kind of doing God of War style combat. It was a good idea that was executed poorly. And so I think the biggest problem with a lot of bad Sonic games is that the worst ones drag the rest down. Stuff like 06 and Shadow, because they play so badly, the rest of it got pulled down with it. But I think ultimately Sonic is a strong franchise that people like to rag on in the same way you would rag on, again, Kingdom Hearts. It's a good comparison point, right? Like if you don't understand the story, you don't understand why there are 1,000 games between 1, 2, and 3. It's easy to pick on it, right? And that's what the internet is designed to do, blow that stuff out of proportion. But I feel like if you played a lot of these games with an open mind, it'd be different. Now, also, if you don't like platformers, if you don't like the classic Sonic games, there's not a ton to love in the later games. But I think if you can give it a chance, there's a lot there. As far as Shadow goes, I've always liked Shadow. He's not my favorite character. As I've said, Knuckles is one of my favorite video game characters ever. But I like Shadow a lot. I mentioned Ken Shepard also, who's a good friend of mine, publicly on the internet, very much loves Shadow as a character, his favorite Sonic character. And how devastating that must be to have this character that gets the short shrift in like almost every game now feel like it's coming to fruition, like the second coming of this character. And like, I agree. I think that between the movie, which I'm, like I said, genuinely excited for, I've enjoyed the other two movies, even the not great Knuckles TV show. I like that because of the strength of the Jeff Fowler films and this new re-release of Sonic Generations, it wouldn't have been the game I would have picked to throw Shadow into. But I'm actually kind of glad they are, because that Sonic Generations came out during one of his anniversaries, and it was designed to pull us from the brink of the bad Sonic games to go, look at Sonic's history. We've remade all these levels and also created some new stuff. Sonic is great. Here's why Sonic's great. And I think doing that with Shadow is a great idea before either remaking Shadow the Hedgehog or making a new Shadow video game, which I think I would really love to have. I mean, I would really love a lot of the characters get spin-off games. Knuckles hasn't had his own game since the Sega 32X, and that game also gets the short shrift and admittedly is also not very good, though I love Knuckles Chaotix. And so I think the lasting impact of Sonic and the history, to kind of wrap up my thoughts, is Sonic Adventure 2 holds up without a doubt. Like, while I struggled with some of it, it absolutely was a fun experience from start to finish with some caveats and asterisks, but I mostly enjoyed my time. It had a huge impact on the legacy of the franchise. The problem is that because Sonic Heroes is kind of a sidestep, it's a full-fledged game with a narrative arc, but it's not like Sonic Sonic 06 was meant to be Sonic Adventure 3. Because Sonic Adventure 2 was so good and Sonic Adventure 3, aka Sonic 06, was so bad, like, it's this kind of wormhole in the Sonic franchise that sucks in any of the good that kind of tries to escape it. And I'm glad that Sonic Generations is getting a re-release on modern platforms with all this extra content, because it'll remind folks, no, Sonic has plenty of great games. I mentioned Sarah Moonen earlier, our associate producer. After the Sonic concert, she had only really had experience with the classic Genesis games. After watching this incredible concert, wanted to play a modern Sonic game because the music was so good, and played Sonic Forces in isolation with really no other Sonic experience. And she went, that was fun, because it's not terrible. Like, you make your own Sonic style animal character. You get to play through these stations. You also get to play as Sonic and some other characters. I think Sonic's legacy is both its greatest weapon and its biggest hindrance at the same time. Like any long-running franchise, just a lot of other long-running franchises have more hits than misses, so it's easy to ignore the mistakes. But they're there if you look for them. And Mario's got them, Zelda's got them, Kirby's got them. All franchises have them, except the Yakuza franchise. That one is flawless. But beyond that one, there aren't any flawless franchises. And so I think the legacy of Sonic 2 is that it's one of the best Sonic games ever, briefly preceded, then superseded by one of the worst Sonic games ever made. And I'll say one of the worst because if you haven't played Sonic 3D Blast, that's also a pretty terrible Sonic game. But I think that's its legacy, is this turmoil. And if the Year of Shadow, as funny as it is to laugh at it, hopefully is more effective than the Year of Luigi, as much as I love Luigi. Because I would love for it to revitalize this character and this part of the story. Because again, Sonic Adventure 2 has a very good story that's kind of buried under some of the bullshit it leaves in the wake. And I'm glad that the movie's getting a version of it, and then we'll get to relive some of it in Cross Shadow Generations. And so, ultimately I'm optimistic about the Sonic franchise. I loved Frontiers. I think it does something really cool. And I think if that's the future of 3D Sonic, I'm excited. I hated Sonic Superstars. It had some of the most terrible stage design and bosses. So I was actually less optimistic about 2D Sonic after that. But I think Sonic games are always going to have that turmoil. I think that's part of its identity at this point. And so I just hope they keep making them. And honestly, Sonic is the greatest example of taking risks and continuing to persevere. Like, you can only take so many financial risks, but like, when we have studios closing down left and right because one game tanks, and then Microsoft, I'll call them out, decides to shut down that studio because of the risks they took, and it didn't, something like Redfall misses so badly, so you shut down a legendary studio because of that. They'll say there's other reasons. There weren't other reasons. Like, I think that the thing I can say about Sonic is that Team Sonic has been allowed to fail, and other subsections of Sega have been allowed to fail and try again until something hits, and it's starting to. And so I'm optimistic about this franchise. I'm excited for this remaster / expansion, and still genuinely optimistic about the Sonic franchise.
I've been on like I mentioned at the top of the episode, I've been on a bit of a personal journey with Sonic this year, one that I didn't fully expect to go on, and I'm glad I had, because I'm glad I've gone on this journey, because I feel like I appreciate Sonic more for what it was and what it is, and it's been really cool to go back and play Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 and see the games that are still to this day kind of the basis for all modern 3D Sonic games. I mean, from the designs of the characters to the music to the way that they tell these stories that have just got grown in kind of the stakes and how big and the narratives are in all these places that we go to. It's been really, really cool, and it's changed a lot of my perceptions of the series as a whole, and a lot of notions that I used to hold, and kind of embarrassed that I kind of used to just go along with the memes and hold these notions and just bash the series for reasons it didn't really deserve. And are, like you said, are there bad Sonic games? Yes, there are. Any franchise you can look at will have some black sheep in the family. And I think looking at the history of Sonic now and seeing where we go from Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 and Heroes, and then we run into kind of, like you said, the wormhole that is Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06, that basically back to back. And I think those two games did a lot of damage to Sonic that took it a long time to recover to the point of where it is now. I think in the last probably 10, 15 years, the best thing that's happened to these Sonic franchises are the Sonic movies. I think those movies have done a fantastic job in kind of rehabilitating Sonic's image in the eyes of the public, of people who kind of cling to the Sonic 06, the Shadow the Hedgehog era of Sonic. And I'm really, really happy for all those characters. And those movies have been amazing financial successes, and I'm sure Sega is thrilled with the reception that their characters have gotten after, kind of years of fighting against the misconception on the internet that every single Sonic game that comes out is a unmitigated disaster. As far as Sonic Adventure 2 goes, I appreciate Shadow's character more now that I have played him. What you're telling me is kind of the height of his narrative, and I like his arc in this game very much, and it kind of disappoints me it goes in the direction that it does, because his story does not get treated particularly well down the stretch. And I understand from the theme and the tone of Shadow the Hedgehog, from what they were trying to do with that game. Like, I get it, and they had an idea, they had a design philosophy, they had a tone that they wanted to go for that game, and they stuck to their guns and they executed it. I would say that it wasn't executed well, and it doesn't really do Shadow justice for that to be his game. But by goddamn, they fucking stuck to their guns on that one. It's just disappointing that that's kind of where Shadow's story kind of leaves off, and then what happens in Sonic 06 happens. So yes, I'm hoping that this year of Shadow, and you mentioned it too, the year of Luigi was not great for Nintendo. I believe that was they posted a financial loss that year. They did the year of Luigi. I wouldn't argue that's Luigi's fault. I believe that was in the middle of all the Wii U stuff, so that's probably more of the reason why the year of Luigi was not successful. I don't place any of that blame on Luigi. Luigi is a saint. He must be protected at all costs. But yeah, I hope this is I hope between the Sonic Generations game that's coming out and the movie, I think there's an opportunity here for a new Shadow video game in the near future that hopefully will not include guns or demon aliens. Although I do like in the from what I've seen of the Shadow portion of the Generations game, they are leaning into that aspect of his history and his character, into the Shadow the Hedgehog stuff with a lot of his like new Doom abilities that he seems to have.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, that's really cool that they're acknowledging that they're not just running from it. They're making it an integral part of his character. So I'm really curious to see how they kind of tie that stuff in with the stuff they do in Generations, to see if they find a way to pay homage to that, even though it wasn't a great a great era for Sonic. I think that's really, really cool. And I agree with you 100%. I think Sonic in general gets a bad rap. They do have bad games, but the thing that struck me the most is when I'd watch a lot of YouTube videos before I do episodes and kind of do some general research and get different points of view on games and stuff. And every time I've watched like any kind of comment section about any Sonic game, maybe with the exception of 06 and Shadow, the comments are not filled with the trolls. They are filled with people who are like, I played this game as a kid. I love this game. It gives me such good memories. And that shows me the true support of Sonic as a franchise and of these games. And like I said, Sonic fans have seen the best of times. They've seen the worst of times, but they show up for their games time and time again. And that's why Sega is still around. That's why they're still successful. That's why they keep getting Sonic games when so many other franchises can't seem to get games for their series if they don't sell well anymore. Sonic keeps running forward, no pun intended. And that's why the Sonic fan base is one of the best fan bases out there, because they show up for their games and they support their games no matter what. And a lot of fan bases could learn something from the Sonic fans. Maybe you just show up for your games and not just yell at them and threaten the developers who make them. Maybe you'd get more games in your favorite series. I don't know. That's just me. That's why I've bought Kingdom Hearts 47,000 times. I want more games in the series. I own Kingdom Hearts in every possible version that it currently exists for me to get my hands on. And I will continue to buy it because I never want it to end. So that's the way. And I understand not everybody is that financially fortunate or makes as bad financial decisions as I do. But it just goes to show the power of, even in the worst of times, supporting the games that you love is really important. Not just for you, not just for the series, not just for the people that make them, but for everybody. So I guess I'm just saying, like, be more positive about video games. Yeah, I guess I'm just saying be more positive about video games to wrap it up. So we'll wrap it up with that. Matt, thank you so much. Oh, yes. What would you like to say?
Well, I just want to ask you one final question, if I may.
Okay.
Now that you've played Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic Adventure 2, and Shadow the Hedgehog, will you in October or sometime throughout the rest of this year buy Sonic Cross Shadow Generations? Are you interested in playing that game? Maybe not when it comes out, but like in general, do you have an interest in picking up that game and finally playing it?
I do, and
Excellent.
I will be picking it up when it launches.
Hell yeah.
And I will be playing it, and I have somebody scheduled to come on and talk to me about it for an episode. So,
amazing. That's awesome.
Yes. So my adventures with Shadow and with Sonic will continue this year. There'll be at least one more game. That will be at least one more game that I play. I'm trying to determine if I have the time in my schedule to fit Sonic Heroes in. I don't know if I feel like I kind of have to, considering I've been on this narrative journey with Shadow. So I feel like that will show up at some point. But yes, I have October 29th circled on my calendar. There was a inner part of me that when they released like the collector's edition, that almost was like, I have to pre-order this, because they were giving away like the Dreamcast like statue, and it had like they had a lot of cool stuff in the collector's edition. My wallet was like, yeah, it was really cool. So yes, I will be picking that up, and I'm really excited to kind of experience that and see. And my guilty confession here is this: I have still yet to see either of the Sonic movies.
Please do.
They're on my list, and I really like Keanu Reeves as Shadow. Like, that's incredible. So I definitely want to see them both so I can see the third movie. So that will be, so yeah, I have a lot more Sonic to go this year before 2024 is out. And I cannot believe that this is where my year went, but this is where it went. So, but with that, we've been going for almost 2.5 hours now. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for staying up late with me, giving me some of your time here. I want to give you some time here at the end to do the old shill all your stuff, tell the people what you're working on, where they can find you, and all that good stuff.
Sure, yeah. First, I just want to say thank you for having me. I've been a fan of the Unlockables for quite some time, and when you were saying that you were kind of winding down and you weren't going to be doing as many episodes, I was bummed because I just found the show, but I'm so excited that you started doing more episodes again and you were looking for guests, and I'm honored to be on it, and happy to come back anytime, talk about Sonic or other things. I like other things too. I mean, there's eventually going to be a Kingdom Hearts 4, and I'm a Kingdom Hearts sicko, so I'm just saying, if you do a long retrospective, you know. But no, thank you for having me. I am Matty K. Stormageddon, also Matt Storm. I am DJ_Stormageddon in most places. Most well known for either being a DJ or a podcaster. I've been a podcast host, producer, and editor for almost 12 years, 13 years. I don't know. Time's a lake. It's weird. A long time. And I currently have 2 active podcasts that I am hosting and a part of. I host Fun and Games with the incredible Jeff Moonen, which the main show in the feed is a topic-based discussion podcast focusing on the positivity in the gaming space and that every game is somebody's favorite. We do console retrospectives, we interview developers, composers, we do genre retrospectives, we do topics like good versus bad signposting in games, is grinding good or bad, things like that. And then we also have a sub-series within the feed called Side Quests, which is a short-form series where a different host every episode talks about a game they love and why they love it. Eric recently did an episode on Final Fantasy IX, which was really great. And speaking to the retrospectives, by the time this is out, we will have released our Game Boy Advance retrospective, which Eric jumped on immediately when we were looking for guests, and it came out really great, and I'm really excited for folks to hear it. But that's Fun and Games. And then I also do Reignite, which is a book club style podcast, but focused originally on just the Mass Effect series. We did the original trilogy and Andromeda, and the idea was, what if we were Shepard or Ryder? What if we were in that character's shoes? What decisions would we make? And then discussing those decisions, as well as, more importantly, which aliens we would romance, which is really why people listen. Once we finished Andromeda, it only made sense to move on to Dragon Age, which is also a very expansive, choice-driven series. We're currently, as of recording, in season 6, doing Dragon Age 2. But for the first time in the history of the show, Frankie, my co-host, and I are current as far as there is a brand new Dragon Age game coming out this year, The Veilguard, which is a name I still hate, but have made my peace with. But I'm very excited for that game, and it's fun to be current with a new entry of the franchise while we're still working on the old stuff. And if you like long form, deep dive franchise discussion, it's really worth listening to. It's the only podcast I've ever been a part of where everyone who finds it goes back to episode 1 and listens through everything to get current because of how methodical we were with the how we analyzed it. And so definitely go check that out. It's really a lot of fun. And if you want to yell at me more specifically, you can go to djstormageddon.com. That's where both my podcasts are, as well as the Patreon for Fun and Games. We have a free tier where you can just get updates on what we're up to, have a one-stop shop for everything we do, but also paid tiers where if you want to throw us a little scratch, you can get some shout-outs, bonus content, articles we write, all sorts of other things. And I think that's mostly it, and I'm going to pop up on a podcast near you as I am guesting on a lot of mutual friend shows over the rest of the year. So can keep out an eye out for that as well.
Again, thank you, Matt, so much. And he listed all that stuff. Please go and check it out. Fun and Games and Reignite have been 2 of the shows that have continued to inspire what I do on this show. So to not only get to work with you, Matt, and listen and be on your shows and listen to what you do, getting to work with you has been like a podcast bucket list item for me. It's incredible. So please continue to keep up that incredible work. Like you said, I will be on when this episode comes out. The Game Boy Advance episode will have released for Fun and Games, and like you said, I did do a side questing episode on Final Fantasy IX, and I did one previously on Kingdom Hearts 2. So there you go. That's par for the course for me, right? That's what people come to expect. It's the only 2 video games I know about in literally all of existence. It's the only 2 I can talk about. But yes, as for me, hi, my name is Eric. You found the Unlockables. Thank you so much for sticking around. And as he mentioned, I do tend to retire and unretire more than Tom Brady, but I'm sticking around for good. At least for a little while until I take my next summer break. If you want to catch up on everything that I've been doing recently, you can go to linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. It has all the links to my Twitter, Instagram, all the kind of social media stuff you can follow me on. You can join the Discord, which, spoiler, my Discord is a little bit smaller and not as lively as some of the other Discords that you can find, but you can catch up with everything going on there. It's football season, so if you like sports, we like to also talk about football. and you can just keep up on what is going on in the world of Unlockables there. I announce when all the episodes come out and stuff like that. And a lot of great people who also have shows in there if you're looking to discover some new shows for your podcast rotation. I recently brought back the Unlockables Patreon due to the encouragement from some people in the community. So there's one tier at $3 a month. You can support the show and get some extra goodies. I've been working on some video vlogs to get myself more comfortable being on camera with video editing and just to kind of talk about stuff I don't normally get to talk about, industry and kind of stuff that I don't really focus on my show too much. And currently we're in the midst of voting for our next game of the month. If you're a patron, you can vote on game of the month, which we will play during that month. And there will be an episode recorded about it at the end of said month. So if you want to be on an episode of the Unlockables, you can join the Patreon and vote on whatever that game of the month is. And then you can sign up to be on the episode at the end of the month and talk to me. Like, that's such a great reward. Yay. I'm just kidding. I need to stop hating on myself so much. But yeah, you can go just search the Unlockables podcast on Patreon. And if you support there, thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. And everything that you give me supporting the show just goes back into stuff that I need for the show, whether that's microphones or games or I really, really need some better lighting. Right now, my lighting is just a lamp with a diffuser, with a shade diffuser on it. So I could really use some, at least some ring lights or something in here because this lighting is not doing my complexion any good. But that is all for this episode. Matt, thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I have a feeling we have many, many episodes in the future that we will collaborate on. But as for me, for the Unlockables, remember, it's not just the story of video games. It is the story of you. Take care, everybody.